All
So,
right.
I see video. I hear you.
Yeah, so do I. Did we see video on the freaking live stream? The thing's still.
Uh,
Mm, the thing's still totally like stuck and everything. I've killed every process on the computer. I've killed all my save browser tabs, all of that stuff. Jumped in with Chrome and then back to Edge. Um, and it's just stuck. Um, yeah.
uh, yeah, I don't. It's not. At least I don't see a link. Do you have a link for that video just in case? Because it's not posted in the original video. It's the comments gone, which is weird.
Right. So, the link for what for the
For
the
where
current
this is
one?
streaming on YouTube.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's
Okay, let me try this.
This is real bizarre.
It is working. Although videos stuttered on your side.
Yeah. I'm really not sure why.
Damn.
Yeah. Completely stuttered and stopped, huh?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, but I can see you. I can see your talking. Your bloom around the thing. Here,
Right.
let me do this. Yeah, very, very weird.
There is a slight delay, but I don't know if that's abnormal or not.
Yeah, so I just killed it down to my icon.
Yep.
And yeah, I don't know how much of a delay there is now.
It's 10 seconds, something like that.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me pop up this YouTube over in Chrome and see if that. What the hell, man?
You know what this looks like to
I
me,
didn't need
Dooms?
that, especially with you, because
Oh, it's we can reschedule. They'll come back, but we could do whatever. We could do this and another one. It doesn't matter to me. This, you know what this seems like, Dooms? This seems like an
yeah,
upstream. This seems like there's an upstream problem. Like you're getting decent downstream, but your upstream's crippled. Right?
right. Here, let me do this then.
I mean, if it
Let
ran a
me
speed
run through the
test and
full. Yeah, let me run through the full speed test. Just a second to get the up speed.
find out what the upstream. Because I mean, you need
Yeah,
for
right.
audio, you don't need that much because we're not talking about Dolby Digital or anything, right? This isn't even stereo. I don't believe it's mono audio, so it's not like it's going to take.
Yeah,
It's like 32 kilobits a second or some stuff, right? Per user at
right.
most. So, but video, yeah, that changes things.
Yeah, maybe that's a good point. Maybe there's an up problem. So it's averaging around 850 megabits a second on down.
Yep, yep.
Let me run the full test here right now. Yeah, up's around 850, 860, 870,
Oh, dude,
880,
that's way
900.
higher than you need.
Yeah, 922.82 megabits a second.
Yeah,
I think maybe it's a routing issue, you know.
Yeah, between you and YouTube somehow.
Yeah, somehow. I mean, that's when I see things like this, I generally think some sort of routing issue.
Yeah. Well, or yeah, a lot of times you'll have a couple of hops that have oversaturation or yeah.
Right.
Do you have? Well, it won't matter because you don't know where StreamYard is sending this, right? I mean, you know it's sending to YouTube, but it's probably doing API stuff, right? So
Right.
without sniffing the traffic, you wouldn't
Yes.
you wouldn't know where it's going to test, your hops between now, here, and there.
Right. Right. Exactly.
You'd have to sniff the traffic to find out where it's going, and that might not be the same next time.
Right. Yeah, it does look like it's about maybe a 10-second delay or something.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess this kind of works. Let me try to put on let me try to put on the camera one more time.
Sure.
And if that doesn't work, I mean, it's probably not. If there's this delay in here, it's probably just going to leave me frozen for a bit.
So far, so good.
Maybe the audio doesn't sync up. I don't know because I don't want to. Yeah, I was turning my head there. All right, so it's looking good for you, Forno, and you guys can hear us and whatnot. I think you can hear us 10 seconds later.
Yeah, there's a 10-second delay.
Right. It seems that way. Okay. Well, I think this is probably good enough, right? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thanks. Thanks, guys, for jumping back in for the third or fourth link of this. Like, I have no idea what was going on there, but it seems like we're here. So anyway, you were saying, Cuilidh, that or we were talking about your entrance into the tech thing, and then how how sort of the streams cross a little bit between RPG and tech work. At least it seems like to me. I think a lot of people who played RPGs ended up in tech work, and a lot of people who started in tech work or ended up in tech work ended up in RPGs too. So you said you started in the 70s. What was your first your RPG book or box? Was it white box or
no.
was it
So kind of interesting, right? So I
yeah.
started playing in the Boy Scouts, right? And I was one of the younger kids, right, in the Scouts, and we had a group of people that were older than us that were playing the game. Now, we didn't really know that much about it. They had talked about it. And of course, we went camping every month, right? So these guys were playing, and we were younger, so they kind of, like, get out of here, leave us alone. But eventually, one of the older guys, his younger brother, was in the troop with us, and he was our same age. So he told us that he was going to run us through a dungeon, right? So we rolled characters up, and I'm not so sure there were real rules, right?
Right.
He might have made it up as he went. Although, obviously he had either witnessed a lot of play or he'd played himself. So it was weird. Rolled up characters. The only character it was 3d6 down the line, right? The only class I would qualify for was a thief, right? So I was a thief, and then another buddy of mine had a fighter, and then so we had this group, and I know we had a small book, a thin book. It wasn't advanced, of course, at this time, right? It's probably 77. I'm not sure. But yeah, so he had this book, and he was looking through it. I don't know if it was a module or if it was a dungeon, or if it was just, I don't know, the coloring book as far as I'm concerned, right? It could have been.
Right.
But the funny thing about it is, despite it being kind of loose on the rules, it was still really, really interesting, right? So
Yeah.
what happened is after that session, right? Like, so, I had like a potion of gaseous form. I didn't know it was gaseous form until I took it. And my buddy had a potion of invisibility, and we're running through this thing trying to survive. And of course, yeah, that ain't going to happen. So after that camping trip, when we came back, we went to the hobby shop to look, right? To find it, to find the game.
Right.
And that's when I got my first book, and it was an AD&D book, right? It wasn't it wasn't basic or OD&D. In fact, at that time, I had never even seen OD&D. And to be perfectly honest, the city I lived in, still the city I live in now, we had hobby shops, but they had trains and model rockets and models. They didn't have a whole lot of RPG stuff, right?
Yeah.
If any, to be honest, up until that point. So, we got our first book, and then we started playing AD&D on our own, right? We really never played with those guys again, which is weird because we went camping with them every month.
Right.
But it was kind of a flash in the pan for them, right? But for us, right? Once me and my other buddy had bought a book and had actually something to read and look at, it was a lot different. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's the big thing, because most of my my early introduction to the game didn't really have anything to do with me having a book. It was someone else sort of guiding the tour or whatever, and me not really knowing what was going on. And there were two instances of that. The first one was very young in grade school as an extracurricular type of activity with a particular teacher, and then the next one was this guy I met in the neighborhood, because we lived in this townhouse thing. This, what would you call it? This sort of this townhouse megalopolis or whatever from the 80s in Central Florida, and I met this kid who was a little bit older than me. And he was like, I heard about this game D&D, so let's play, And he just had a paper. He didn't have no rule book or nothing, no dice, no nothing,
Right.
And we just made stuff up, And then the same thing happened, though. As soon as that happened, and that was about maybe a year later than the experience in playing with the teacher and whatnot and the other students, because I was new at that school. They had already been doing it, and it was like my first session with them and my first really even day being at that school. But once this guy ran this thing, then it was immediately a quest to go find actual rule books and whatnot. And once you find the rule books, that changes everything.
Right.
Yeah.
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 The odd thing is, and I know younger people, right? And what I mean are people that are now probably 50 instead of 60.
Yeah.
Those people, they're like, yeah, we would go to Walden Books, right? But we didn't have a Walden Books. We didn't even have a mall, right? So it was like the one hobby shop you had in town. And by the way, your parents don't drive you there. You're walking there, or you're riding a bike there,
yeah.
right? And you're definitely not telling your parents you're doing that, because it's 15 miles away, right?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yes. Right. And I'll add, if you're with a group of friends and one of them has the only bike, then you're all walking.
That's right.
Okay, so
yep.
Because that ain't cool. Somebody's stashing the bike off in the woods or whatever, and on the way back, you're hoping that it's still there.
It's still there.
Yeah. That was like our old arcade days. The same type of thing would be going on.
I really didn't mind walking, to be honest. I walked a lot when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And part of that, it wasn't because I had a horrible home life or my parents are terrible, because that's not true. None of that's true, right? We were poor, but that didn't mean we had a miserable life, right? My parents, they cared about me. They took care of me. They tried to do everything they could for us, right? I mean, my dad was a steel worker, so in the 80s, especially the early 80s, he was on strike all the time, right? If
Right.
the Teamsters had a strike, they had an agreement. The steelworkers would go on strike. So we were on strike for like 4 or 5 years out of the 80s, right? Like literally on strike. So that, money was tight, but that didn't mean they didn't care, right? It just was, it was different, right? So, you'd say, hey, I'm going to go to the park with my buddy over here, and the park's right over there, right? A little schoolyard park, not like a real park. But then you'd be like, well, let's go to the hobby shop over there. And after that, let's go to Gemini, which is the arcade that you can pay by the hour instead of quarters, right? But, that was kind of later, right? But we had one hobby shop that had D&D stuff. And back then, at least from my experience, and maybe this isn't common, but you had to buy the dice individually, right? A D20 was like a buck.
I remember that.
Right,
I remember
and you'd have these bins, and you'd have to pick the dice you wanted. And the D20 was $1 or $1.75, and if it was clear, you had to pay more, and you'd have to wait because like I don't have enough money to buy a whole set.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's old. I had totally forgotten about that. As a matter of fact, that's that's the true old school nature of that. I mean, this is before, well before they came in, the clear plastic dice tubes and all of that stuff. Toward the mid '80s and whatnot, or later '80s maybe. But bins of dice.
We were lucky enough to have and he it was called High Flight Hobbies back in the day. It's gone. It's been gone for a long time. But again, High Flight. Why? Because they were a rocket they did rockets and models, and they even had those books. You remember the books about factions of World War II, and it would tell you everything about the Fusiliers, right? And have pictures of them and the kit they'd have, and explain all that. It was kind of interesting, but it was like RC cars, and there wasn't a whole lot of D&D, at least not initially. Later on, he had a lot of D&D, right? And that's how he got
started becoming,
Gamma World was in there. That's where I got my copy of Gamma World, right? Buddy got his copy of Top Secret there, and Gangbusters, right? And then I got Star Frontiers from this guy because it was really the only game in town for it. And he took some risks, right? I mean, he literally did. The whole catalog. Now, it was TSR. There really was no other stuff, right? There was no Judges Guild or any of those other companies' products in there. It was TSR, and that was it, which is fine at the time. It's what I played. But yeah, it was kind of interesting. So, my first game, I assume it was like basic, but I really don't know. It definitely was not AD&D, right? Because we didn't. The book I saw he had was not an AD&D book, right? But he was very secretive with it, right? He's like hiding it, so he wanted to, you know what I mean? It's kind of funny, but it was great. That
might have been a Holmes. It might have been a Holmes book.
It very well could have
been. I believe that came out in '77, right? And it would be a particularly nondescript book in the hands of another person, being that it was just sort of that blue and white cover, nothing on the back.
If I had to recall from memory, I think it had a blue and white cover, right? I honestly do.
Right.
But
so that would be the one.
Yeah. That's probably what we did.
And that was a really, I've got a special place in my heart for Holmes, and my introduction to Holmes came a little bit later because I started just a little bit later in the early '80s, and I picked up once we played these couple of games and whatnot. I went to where did I go? I went to Walgreens first because there was a Walgreens, and it was in like this little strip mall type of thing that we would walk up to because there was a pet store there that you could go to, and they would have some cool amphibians and stuff. You could go there and buy like a newt, for example, and bring it home and end up releasing it into the lake when it looked like it was going to die or something. um, and they had a little tiny arcade type of thing there. And we had a sub shop around the way. So we'd walk up there and we'd spend all day in that general area. So I bought a red box, I think in '83, from Walgreens. Um, because I came to understand that there were actually the books, right? The books and
Right.
boxes and stuff. And then I would go to the comic book store because I was also into comic books at the time. Stuff like X-Men, Avengers, Power Man and Iron Fist, Savage Sword of Conan. I got introduced to that at that comic book store, and then they started stocking D&D stuff and minis and all that. And then I went, looked up in the yellow pages for the premier hobby shop in the area, and then I went there, and that's when I bought my advanced stuff, all within a couple of years of each other. And that it's funny because that comic book store, I decided to look it up not too long ago, a few years ago or whatever, and there was when I went there, and this guy, I would annoy him. I know I would annoy him because I would go in there and I would talk about D&D and all this stuff to this guy, and he was like, I don't know, man. He was a teenager, feathered hair, Pink Floyd shirt,
It's
and
the
I'm
'80s,
like,
man. You had to be there.
yeah, man. Yeah,
white
I'm like
Levi's,
10,
right?
or
Yeah.
right. Comb in the back pocket, and I'm like 10 or something, and I'm looking up to this guy because he's like the comic book D&D fantasy god or whatever, and he's just some pimply faced youth, right? He's just
Yeah.
an employee. Well, looking it up just a few years ago, that comic book store still exists, and that
Wow.
same guy, his name's Phil. That same guy ended up working there long enough, and it's in Orlando. It's called Coliseum of Comics. He's that they now have like 4 locations, and he bought out the owner, and he owns the whole thing. This
Wow.
guy, I would like to next time I visit up there, go up there and be like, I know you don't remember me, but I'm sorry for irritating you so much about D&D and comics. And occasionally I would I'd call the store up, because we'd get one of those comic book buying guides or whatever. And we just, we were just kids, man. So we'd say stuff like, hey, I've got like a Action Comics number 4, how much is that worth? And he's like, well, I would have to see it. Once again, you had to be back there in the '80s when,
Yep.
you just had a phone and a whole lot of boredom and being really poor,
That's
good times.
hilarious.
And then,
So
yeah,
he's
and then the
the
homes
90s. That's amazing.
Yeah, the '80s and the '90s and the rest, and I would assume that guy now is 5-6 years older than me. And then coming all the way around to Holmes, I ended up I had this teacher in what, 4th grade? Yeah, I think 4th grade science teacher. His name was Mr. Sokolitsky, right? And he had this cool like lab and all this stuff, and was he was Eastern European, probably Russian, as like the name might indicate or whatever. But this guy was real cool, and he would let us dig through his drawers and whatnot. And one day, I opened one of his drawers under like a shelf of beakers or something like that, and there's a Holmes book in there.
Oh,
And I
nice.
looked, and I didn't even know that stuff existed. Right, I had no clue. It wasn't like the internet existed where you could just search this stuff up. And he let me take it home and borrow it for a few days, and then my family used to go to. We had to have these little community thrift stores sprinkled over town, and rather than doing garage sales, we'd go to the thrift stores, and
Right.
I would go to the thrift stores, and I amassed a pretty good collection just from going in there and finding these things for like $1.99, $1.50, whatever they would charge. That old time of discovery was really interesting.
Yeah, it's funny. So yeah, I had not played basic except for perhaps that first session, right? Which was it was that camping trip. So it was like 2 days, right? Because we got there Friday, we were there Saturday and Sunday, and we played Saturday and Sunday, right?
Right.
But when I went to the store and I found the advanced stuff, I'm like, why would I buy this basic crap, right? I'm just gonna go with
right.
the stuff, and it's kind of funny. There's a joke about that, right? We played D&D and it was advanced, but that was a real thing, right? And the sad part of it is, to be honest, at least the home stuff. I haven't done much of the other stuff, but the game is just as good, or even in some cases better, from a workflow standpoint, or just from a flow standpoint. Like if you're just grabbing the book and you want to sit in the table and let's play, advanced isn't the game for you, right?
Right.
But it was kind of sad because later on I'm like, man, I think I would have enjoyed playing this. Of course, it's long gone, if you get my meaning, at that point, right? I was like, we're playing first edition, and that's it. And, it was AD&D. There was no first edition because that was the only edition of AD&D at the time.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a sad thing, because I think if I'd actually not been that arrogant jackass as a kid saying, well, why would I ever play this basic stuff, right? It says basic. That's for idiots. I'd have probably enjoyed the other games as well, right? And it might have given us the ability to kind of step off, right? Instead of going into something like Gamma World or Gangbusters or Star Frontiers or whatever, we could play basic and advanced, right? And that way you get kind of a break from that other stuff for a little bit,
yeah.
Even though, I mean, it's the same idea, they're not the same. So
right, they're not the same, and the particularly when like Orange Spine type of stuff came out and whatnot, because I had Dungeon Master's Guide and Player's Handbook before Orange Spine stuff, but once that stuff came out, it was like, hey, this is it, and them choosing to name it Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, it led me into the same kind of experience that you had. It's like, well, obviously I'm advanced.
Yes.
So, I mean, what do I want? I want D&D level 10 or D&D for beginners,
Exactly.
and I think that was a conscious decision, but it was a decision that kind of eliminated some of the ability to really get sort of steeped into the original ideas, right?
Yep.
Because you just went straight to advanced, and then you read that stuff, and you're a kid, and you're confused as hell. You're like, okay, well, now I understand what these words mean in the context of the sentence. I understand what's being said here. This stuff is brilliant, but you could spend weeks trying to put together the pieces from the various books to try to figure out how it worked, because you wanted to play by the rules, right? I mean,
that's right.
Back in the 80s, games were all about rules,
They were very prescriptive, right? It was like, you play it this way. The only one you didn't play that way was Monopoly, because you wouldn't play it the way the rules are written, right?
Because everybody had Monopoly house rules, right?
Yes. They're like, this is the only board game we have, and we got to play it, and it lasts 3 damn hours because of the house rules.
Exactly. But if you sat down and played something like Life, or you sat down and played something like there's a whole bunch of Clue, Clue.
Yeah. Sorry,
even
games.
A dice game like Yahtzee. Sorry, those games all had rules, and you would want to play by the rules, and I felt the same way about D&D, you know.
I definitely, back in the day, I had Vasily syndrome, right? Plato, morons. and
Right.
and I did get over that. It was like about 6 months ago when I recovered from that syndrome.
Yeah,
Where, just like, oh, wait a minute, maybe I'm a smug son of a bitch and I just didn't know it. Too smug to know.
Well, yeah, I don't even. Yeah, I feel like I followed kind of a parallel path. Hey, hang on 1 second, okay, or talk or whatever. I spent so much time in pre-stream and trying to figure this out that I gotta take a bathroom break for just a short moment.
Sure.
Sorry. Be right back.
Hey, any questions from the peanut gallery out there? I'll tell you what, and you guys probably know this. There's something, and I think it happens to everyone that puts their time in or actually attempts to play. Play. In this case, it's AD&D or D&D, but it could be any role-playing game. There is that feeling of exploration and discovery that you get. Like, for me, when I was playing that first scenario, that first time at Scout Camp, it was, I had this magical potion. No idea what the hell it does, right? There's something on the other side of the door. I don't know what it is. Taking the potion and trying to figure out what can I do with this? What happens? Right? That kind of thing. It's not real common, right? In the world, unless you go somewhere that is so radically different than what you're comfortable with, right? Like, maybe if you went to Carlsbad Caverns, right, and you're a landlubber, you sit above ground, right? That experience there is so different that there's a feeling of wonder that it's not easily wiped away, right? And I think for me, even though, again, that first game I played was, if I watched me playing that today, I'd be like, wow, what the hell, right? That this is just terrible. But that I don't know, that activation of that wonder or exploration center in your brain just fires. Like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
right? I could do what? Right? Completely detached from reality, right? And you could get that with a really good book, right?
Yes.
But it's different when you get to stick your finger in the water and cause the wave than when you're just reading it, right?
That's a brilliant way to put it. Yeah, it's massively different, and it really, it does. It changes you forever.
It does.
Yeah, and even as you get older, unfortunately, sometimes it seems like, particularly in periods of stress, the imagination wanes, and you always want to get back to that type of thing that you would hold into your head that was so dear to you or whatever. But yeah, it's an amazing experience. And given that role-playing games were introduced to us, that's probably one of the most fantastic creative additions that I can think of to human society.
It is for me, right? I mean, I could go back and I can remember, like I told you, I went camping. We went camping every month of the year, and we didn't go to a campground, right? We went to national forest or just some remote place, right? It wasn't
Right.
like, where they had lots where you could park. No, we had to trench if it was winter, right? Because you didn't want water getting your tent, or but the fact is I remember a lot of that, but I can tell you definitively that first session of D&D, that feeling I got, I could feel that right now, and it's like today. Whereas that other
Right.
stuff, despite it being awesome, it was great, right? I loved camping. Uh, it's nothing in comparison, right? It's so diminished in comparison, which is weird and sad, but at the same time, it just shows you how powerful that feeling, or that activation of your imagination is, right?
Yes.
And
And then,
that's, yeah. Go ahead.
that's just a really, really good way to put it and to look at it. In perspective, is because it's just so much more visceral and whatnot, and embedded in the memory in a specific way than anything else. I love fishing, right? I like hunting sometimes, but I love to fish, and around the same time, I caught my first Florida largemouth bass and stuff like that. And I remember that, but it's not the same at all. I mean, it was a sense of wonderment in the moment, but it's not the same. Same thing like you said with camping and whatnot. Once you're introduced to RPGs though, everything changes. So now I'm going out, 9, 10 years old, and I'm walking out in the woods by myself,
Yes. Yes.
and thinking RPG while I'm out there. I'm walking along the side of the bank of the lake, throwing rubber worms for bass and whatnot, and imagining, like imagining all of the internals of that process of catching them. It's really crazy when that part of your brain gets activated, and I don't think there's anything else other than RPGs that can do it quite like that. So you make some really good points there.
One of the things that, and again, like I told you, I kind of started a little later than a lot of people in my era. Not necessarily in my hometown, because it was the same for all of us. But I started computer stuff late, right? I mean, we had Apple II computers in high school, but there were 2 courses. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
Basic and Pascal. And once I had taken those, right, there's nothing else to take, right?
Right.
I mean, I did go to the library as often as I could. Now, mostly to play games or crack software. But I can tell you what, though, and the reason why I bring this up is what happened with AD&D and my brain allowed me to do those other things that make it much more easy for me to adapt. Right? So
Yes.
I would argue the pattern recognition skills I have today were stemmed. They may not have been completely developed by AD&D, but they were definitely stemmed by AD&D. Right? Where I can now,
agree.
I can look in a bit pattern and say, there it is. That's what I'm looking for right there. Whether it's in hex or binary, a lot of that was the awareness that was revealed to me of my own skills with AD&D, right? So there is a tie there, right? There is definitely a tie there.
I think so too, and there's because I've recognized that in myself as well. Maybe I haven't really thought about it as succinctly in terms of where it came from, but pattern recognition, things like things that go into programming and general technology work, sort of branching patterns of logic and trying to wrap everything up into sort of this consistent ball that you're capable of understanding. for me, all that stuff specifically came from AD&D. I love D&D and basic D&D and all that stuff that I had. But AD&D was the thing that got me to say, okay, well, um, hey, Dad, will you drop me off at the library downtown on Saturday afternoon and come pick me up, 12 hours later? And I would just wander around the place and, read medieval history, read the dictionary, read the encyclopedia. And it's really AD&D that got me to read the dictionary and the encyclopedia as if they were, like novels or something, right?
Right.
I'm sure you probably had the same experience, and most of us of our age probably did, where you pick up a Encyclopedia Britannica, World Book, whatever, and you just read it just for fun, or the dictionary.
Right.
Just flip through it and find all these words and find out what they mean, and
Yeah.
understand the context in which they're to be used, and really that early AD&D material left that sort of indelible mark on me, to always want to be that way. And maybe that's sort of kind of the tie between D&D players, particularly of our ages and whatnot, D&D players going into fields like technology or engineering or math or finance, or
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. If you mix my experience with war games, right? So I did, although I didn't have money for them, I had friends that had Avalon Hill Games, right? And of course, the original Divine Right from TSR, because Bud, the guy that was at High Flight, had the Divine Right, right? Those games gave me the procedural standpoint, right? Where they're like, hey, here's the constraints of the rules and the order, and you follow it, and it's very prescriptive. And then you take D&D and you're like, okay, you still have those same prescriptive rules, but you could do whatever you want in the middle of it, right? And I think again, that's where just war games alone would probably help me be successful in a computer science role, but with the D&D stuff, that was what let me jump outside the box, because I always asked, well, what else can I do? Right? Not just in the game, but as a person, right? I'm like, look, I'm looking at this, and I'm like, okay, I'm really frustrated. Like, give an example, right? Ultima, the game Ultima back in the day.
Yeah.
There's some monsters you couldn't kill, right? And that was intentional, so you couldn't just go around and wipe the whole world apart. I'm like, why? Why can't I kill that guy? Why is that guard invincible? I'm going to go look, right? Most people would be like, well, don't attack him. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I want to know why, right? And I think that curiosity about my own knowledge and my own skill sets was instilled by AD&D, and then I am going to go find out. Oh, by the way, he doesn't take damage. That's why. He doesn't have infinite hit points. You just can't hurt it, right? Well, now wait a minute. Maybe he does take damage now, right? You know what I mean? I'm going to change the conditions, and now he does take damage. And wow, strangely enough, no one is invincible in the game now, right? So what am I going to do? I'm going to get a boat, and I'm going to go blast everybody on the planet, right? And I'm going to be the only person left. It's just it's just an interesting thing that I'm sure that a lot of people have alluded to in the past, right? But for me, it's a very personal thing, right? It's probably a personal thing for them as well. But it really did push me. And again, that the tie between the draw for tech and the draw for TTRPGs is very similar. Or at least they were.
Yes.
Not as much today, right?
But, yeah. Today kind of sucks a little bit. It was all about a quest for knowledge.
Right.
Particularly in the early days of tech, it was adventurous, and it was the only thing that gave me the same feeling. So my first, because I started, how we all kind of start. once you get to the point where you can go to one of the computer super shows or whatever, and it really, really about the time because you had a good bit of modification capability and uh, building of a computer at a certain point in time, but it really exploded in say the early to mid 90s, where everything became a lot more, maybe the mid 90s or something like that. And that's when I really got involved because I had been playing around with computers. Yeah, I was poor as well, so I never had like the new computer. I was a proud owner for Christmas of 1986, I want to say, or 1987, of an Apple III. And
Oh,
I've
wow.
never met anyone who has ever had an Apple III, and I completely understand what my parents bought it at a garage sale and whatnot, and that thing was just this walled off box where I could play Ghostbusters or Moon Patrol, and that was it. And
Yeah.
there was nothing else I could do. Even at the time, I would go into the computer store or whatever and try to find some sort of joystick or whatever, and nothing would work with this Apple III. But I still liked it for those things. Getting off school, coming home, and playing Moon Patrol was like super fun. Um, but once you got it to the point where you could actually buy components and assemble your own computer and stuff, that's kind of where I started. My dad came out and visited me because he had discovered that a little before I did. I was maybe 21, 22, and I lived across the state, and they were still in Central Florida. And he came over with a good friend of mine to some computer show over in like St. Pete, Tampa, Tampa Bay area or whatever. And I went there with them and bought these parts and put together my computer. Because prior to that, all I had really done was add a peripheral card or memory to a 386 or 486. Building the computer from whole cloth sort of changed everything for me. And then it was just maybe 5 years later that I really got involved in IT work because I met a guy, and just by talking computer hardware and software, I was working in the restaurant business at the time. He was like, "Hey, you want to come work as my assistant or something?" He was the IT director of this place, and I go there, and the guy brings me way early version. He's like, "Hey, you see this thing over here? I've got this computer here, right? And it's got multiple little tape drives, uh, and all this junk in it. One of those monolithic like server tower boxes
Yeah.
from way back when. Yeah, and he's like, "Hey,
Like a
I've
deck
got this."
rainbow or something with was it a toilet paper floppy?
Yeah,
Toilet paper roll that had a
right.
floppy on top and bottom? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember
yeah, and
those.
he's like, yeah, and he's like, "Hey, I've got this copy of Red Hat." you know Hey, why don't you see what you can do with this? And man, I'd never messed with Linux before. I was a Windows 3 guy, Windows 95 guy, Windows 98 guy, and then all of a sudden my job is to figure out Linux and install
Right.
stuff, and then start working with Apache web server and learning Perl and all these really crazy esoteric things. And that was the only time I was ever really exposed to something that was as imaginative and as formative as particularly specifically getting into AD&D. So yeah, you bring up some great points, and I had similar experiences.
Well, and I think a lot of people that are that deep into it, right, have that experience simply because they're very similar. Strange enough, right?
Right.
I will tell you though, it's weird because this is just how reality works sometimes, right? So there was a period of time where I worked at HP. It was for 11 years, right?
Mm.
It was you know, early 2000, well, just at 2000. until about 2011, right? And I had a friend of mine that I grew up with that was a motorhead, right? Could not care less about computers, right? Did not care.
Right.
He was also in the scouts, right? The same scout troop I was in. He did not care about, he was in that first session with us, but he was like, yeah, that's not for me, right? But, you know, it's funny, and it is so strange how this happens, right? So I'm like, he's going to go, you know, go work building cars, right? At a car factory. He's going to work for GM, right? So about 3 years ago, right? And we're talking again, high school was when I really last saw him. But I worked with him at a gas station, and he was a motorhead, and he just didn't care about any of this stuff, right?
Right.
So about 3 years ago, I was like, I wonder what happened to that guy, right? So I thought, I'll see if I can look him up. He still lives in the state somewhere, right? Probably. Turns out he started working at HP 5 years later than I did, right?
Oh, wow.
And had worked there for 6 years while I worked there. No clue that this had happened, right?
Yeah.
And I'd asked him, I was like, he's still there, by the way, right? He still works there. I was like, wow, this is like the last place that I thought that you would land, right?
Yeah.
Because this wasn't something that you even remotely cared about. And he told me, he's like, in high school, you remember we had this event that happened where I had done some stuff with some software. And he's like, you remember when I grabbed that disk and I went home for reasons? And I'm like, yeah, I remember that. It's like, for some reason that imprinted on me. And I thought that was really cool. So he decided to go into tech instead of cars, right? And then he's like,
Right.
I didn't understand back then what you guys were doing, right? It just didn't seem interesting to me. It didn't seem fun. But funny enough, he plays TTRPGs now, right? Now, pre 5e, right? But I was like, wow, right? We completely bounced off of it when you were a kid, completely bounced off, right?
Mm-hmm.
But later on, it had you anyway. it took you in anyway.
Yeah, right.
You can't escape, buddy. It's just the way it is. Right?
Yeah. No, there's no escape. And as a matter of fact, some of the people I played with 35 years ago, even earlier than that, even 40, a little over 40 years ago or whatever, every once in a while I'll look them up, and whenever one of these guys pops into my head, because that's one thing that was also interesting about it, is that I can remember most of the names of the people that I used to play D&D with, right? Or RPGs, Call of Cthulhu, Paranoia, any of these RPGs or any of these war games or any of these big, large scale board games. But I remember almost nobody else, and I'll look these people up, and I find them, and they're doing things like I looked up this one guy a few years ago, and we used to sit on, what did he have? It was a Atari 800, Atari 400, Atari 800 or something. And his older brother had AD&D, and that he had some stuff like Monster and Treasure Assortment, Geomorphs, stuff I had never seen, and it was pretty amazing. But that guy's he's in tech, in the defense industry with like Lockheed Martin or something. And
Okay.
most even if these people end up going into sales for tech companies, I find that it just tracks all the way across. So is this Kev? That's what
yeah.
that's what
I
Michael
answered to
wants
Daniel.
to know.
It is. It definitely is.
Yes,
I'm that
right.
guy from the Tuesday and Friday games too. So
right.
So I did the defense stuff too, right? In the middle. When I graduated high school, right? I needed to get a job. I moved to New York for a little while. I was living in Staten Island, Brooklyn and then Staten Island, and then I came home, and you know, during that period, I didn't really know anybody. I mean, I had family there, that's why I was there, but I didn't really play any D&D, right? But I started out, like, my first job was at the gas station, right? And I did that in high school from 15 until I graduated, right? And then I started working for a hospice. I don't know if seems like a strange placement, but I was doing all their data management and billing and stuff like that, right? And then after that, I worked for a startup that was in the defense industry, right? We were a sub for Lockmart. At that time, it was just Lockheed, but and I worked out at an Air Force base in a remote area in Colorado. And it was funny because those two things, startup plus defense, was such a horrible thing, right? It was brutal, right? It was so brutal. Hey, by the way, we didn't really make as much money doing the commercial stuff that we wanted to do, because I was doing offensive, pen testing back in the day, right? This is
right.
I'd say 94, right? Before it really was a thing, right? When it really wasn't being done.
Yeah, that's definitely early.
Yeah. But, they're like, hey, commercial stuff, the sales aren't so good. So, we got to send you out to the base for a while, right? You're like, I'm going to be in this room with this building with no windows, which I thought would bother me, but it didn't, funny enough. And then, obviously after that, I worked for another company that was just commercial, didn't do defense stuff. And then I was working for Northrop Grumman and HP, and then where I currently work. But, all that stuff together, I would say outside of sales, although even in sales, outside of sales, most of those people had played significant amounts of TTRPGs or at least war games, right?
Right.
Depending on their age, right? Older guys didn't really play the TTRPGs so much, but there's not many that didn't play Tactics too, right? You know what I mean? Or, any of the other, squad leader or advanced squad leader,
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I mean, it's the. I mean, I don't want to beat the dead horse on it, and I sort of run out of things to say about it, but I agree with you completely. It just seems like a natural, sort of a natural kind of gravitational pattern or whatever to involve yourself with those kinds of things. The same thing as, because those things go into history, military history in particular, medieval history, World War One history, World War Two, even Korean War and Vietnam War and older wars and warfare. And there's just a lot of overlap in interest. And it's really remarkable to me. I mean, maybe it's just that maybe part of it is that a certain type of person gravitates towards these things equally or semi-equally, or maybe it's that certain type of person was created because of what they were exposed to, and these things naturally coexist, so by being exposed to role-playing games and to fantasy novels and things like that, regardless of which one you got into first, you or science fiction novels in particular as well, you naturally gravitate toward the other one. It's almost like it's almost like AD&D in particular, and war games and stuff like that are sort of their own STEM kind of discipline, right?
Yeah. Yeah, especially if you have people that are really strict rules, right? Which again, I make fun of it. I don't really mind it so much. As long as it's not a take that kind of thing, right? I actually appreciate it when somebody says, "Hey, you're doing that wrong." Yes. It's funny how that happens, right? Again, I recovered recently from massive smug syndrome. Uh, and I say recovered, but I'm a liar. It's not. It's no different. But I had a friend of mine that lives down in Georgia come up to visit. He used to live here. Also,
Yeah.
was a big D&D guy, but he came to visit. Right, he's coming up to visit family, and he brought his kids, and we were playing a game. In this case, it was called Roll for the Galaxy, right? Which is a good. Let's say that's a good general audience game.
I haven't played it.
It's actually a great game, especially if you have like 5+ people you need to play. But it's funny, his son, who I'd met before, but really hadn't had much interaction with. Smart kid, right? Really, really smart kid. So we're playing the game, and I'm teaching him because I've played it before quite a few times. And he tells me, he looks at me straight in the eye. He's like, "You're doing it wrong." And I'm like, "What?" He's like,
right.
"That's not how the rules works." And I'm like, no. You just play, right? This is how it works. And then he's like, "No, let me show you." I'm like, "Okay." Well, I'm willing to learn from anybody. And, sure enough, if you're wrong, I'm going to let you know. But he was right. He was absolutely right. He's like, "Hey, the iconography of the game tells you how this works. The rules really don't." Right? And sure enough, when he showed it to me and he explained it to me, I'm like, "You're absolutely right. I've been playing this wrong the whole damn time."
Yeah,
which is hilarious, right? So I actually don't mind being told I'm wrong, especially when I absolutely am wrong, right? Because I want to learn to play the right way, and to be honest with you, streamline the game quite a bit, right?
Right.
Yeah, I make fun of the fact that people bring rules lawyers to the table, but I actually don't mind it. It's only when it's confrontational that I have a problem with it, right? Where they're like, "Yeah, you're wrong, and you're stupid," right? Okay, sure, I'm stupid. Cool.
Right.
Your opinion. Take
people
it.
like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, people like that. Those are the type of people I think specifically, Gary and everybody else afterward, and maybe even beforehand, we're talking about with a specific type of rules lawyer, being that they're both confrontational and generally maybe, I mean, this is my own supposition, but maybe largely ignorant of what everybody's there for. But if somebody shows up who's an expert at the rules and generally sort of, for lack of a better word, a nice person and somebody who brings the rules to the forefront for the game's sake, I love that. I love that. I'm in a PF1E game right now, which really is not much different than 3.5. And
it's not.
I've played tons of it in the past. It's been quite some time, but I've got other players in there, and some of them have played really recently and still play all the time. And that's one of those types of scenarios where I'm happy to be shown where I'm wrong, because it gives me an opportunity to learn something. And
that's right.
Not only to learn something about the rules, but to then sort of internally dig into the rules and try to think about why they were designed that way. Because, with a TTRPG, you've got the rules, and then you've got the design decisions that led to those rules. And I find both relatively equally fascinating.
Absolutely. I think where I step off, right, when it gets bad for me is when it's not the game, it's a debate, right? Their fun is debating, not playing the game, right? And I'm like, "Look, man, I'm willing to debate with you. You want to do rhetoric? Cool. If you want to do philosophical, cool. If you just want to argue about stupid shit I saw on the street, cool. But let's agree to that up front, right? We're at the table now playing the game. Debate time is over." Right? And I think that's mostly what drives me off, right? Is that, I'm here to debate. I'm not here to play, right? Well, we're here to play, right? We'll debate with you later, right? But today, at this moment, this table, we're playing the game, right? And yes, you can argue all day because they're complex rules, right?
Yes.
And as they're formatted, as you've seen, right, the one table that has the one thing that clarifies the rule for the entire book, right,
Yes.
that has a subnote, it's not noticed by everybody, or maybe even anybody, right?
Maybe even anybody until years later.
Yeah.
You know.
But that's kind of a funny thing that came up in my face-to-face game, right? So I have a weekly AD&D game with some really, really good friends, way better players than I am, including my son, who's again, he knows his stuff, right? He can refer all the way back, and he's new compared to me, right? I've been playing this forever. That's actually it's a good thing and a bad thing at the same time, right? Because it's like reading your own writing, right? You miss the errors because you read right through them, right? But something that came up in our, we were like, okay, so we're doing this adventure and we're in the underground, so we got to figure out how can we eat, right? We don't have any rations left. Where are the cooking rules? What cooking rules? There are no cooking rules in AD&D. There are none. Second edition, yes. Now, I know that's AD&D as well, but that's second edition. AD&D is first edition to me. It's just how I was exposed. But I was like, yeah. Oh, wait. There's got to be a secondary skill at least, right? Nope. There are no cooking rules for first edition.
Not even on the secondary skills table.
No, not in the secondary skills shot. Not in the Dungeoneer Survival Guide, right? Not in the Wilderness Survival. I'm like, what is going on here? How did I miss this? Right? It's kind of hilarious.
Yeah, so not even in the survival guides, nothing.
I did not see it in the survival guides. If anybody listening to this knows a place, put it in there. I'd like to read up on it because I obviously I've missed it, but it was hilarious. Yeah. I'm like, wow. Right now, obviously,
that is
poison
actually really interesting
and stuff like that. That's covered, right? So if you eat bad stuff, you can get a disease. That's covered, right? But yeah. It's kind of funny.
That's really interesting, especially when you consider that in the survival guides and Oriental Adventures. I mean, maybe there's something in Oriental Adventures.
I did not look in Oriental Adventures, and there's a lot of good stuff in Oriental Adventures. There's a lot of good stuff. It is a underrated book, right? And I know it's everybody's like, wow, samurais and ninjas, right? The 80s, right? That yeah, of course, right? There's samurais in it, but that doesn't mean the rules are junk, because they're not. That is a very well done book. I really like it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I really like it too. And what it does is sort of one thing I think that it does really well, in addition to some rules clarifications that weren't included in Unearthed Arcana and stuff like that. One thing I think it does really well is sort of present this idea of a different society and how that society can be built out within the rule guidelines of AD&D, and also how sort of an honorific society versus kind of the Occidental sort of thing that you're emulating in medieval fantasy.
Yes,
how it's different. How honor is different, and how weapons can be different. I mean, like, I could easily see somebody using kind of the design and layout and ideas of Oriental Adventures as sort of a foundation for building out any of a number of source books that detailed other races within the fantasy world.
That's right.
So you could use a lot of that stuff, or you could use the sort of the honor system and all that for elves and dwarves and stuff. You could use sort of the societal approach to things outside of honor and more towards craftsmanship and artmanship and stuff like that with any of the fantasy races, for example, even within sub-factions of humans. So I really feel like almost, all of that stuff one thing that I really like about all of that TSR output, regardless of how well regarded or poorly regarded the book ended up being over time, these were a lot of people putting in hundreds or thousands of hours into presenting something, and
Yeah,
doing it really better than anybody else. I loved plenty of old RPGs, but there was nothing like opening up, a new AD&D hardback that you had never seen before.
agreed. Agreed. And a lot of them, I get it. I'll tell you, I was one of the first ones to be upset with the Orange Spine, but not because of the content, but because of the quality of the book. Those things were fragile, right? They fell apart quickly. And when you're playing
Yeah.
D&D every day of the week for 4+ hours and you're using those books all the time, it doesn't take very long for them to disintegrate, right? I know they did kind of fix it later, but those original books, man, I just like, I'm afraid to take this to the game. Because one day I'm going to have to 3-hole punch it and put it in a binder, right? I can't afford to have this
Right.
rebound, right?
Yes. And UA, Unearthed Arcana, was horrible for that. But
It was
it's
maybe the
not the
worst.
only one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the only one that suffered from those sorts of issues. You
Yeah.
know, but Unearthed Arcana was really bad. Even a little bit later on with though not AD&D Rule Cyclopedia. I've got 3 of those, I think. One of them's really nice. One of them's really nice, and one of them is just completely, like, I feel like opening it and kind of pulling out the binding a little bit and just squirting some glue down in there and clamping it together because it's completely come apart at the seams.
I have a good friend of mine that is his favorite rule set, right? The Rule Cyclopedia is his favorite rule set. And I was talking to him, I said, how do you deal with it? Because I mean, those books, they're just fragile, right? And I like books at the table. Sorry. Even when I'm playing VTTs, I have the physical books, right?
Right.
I want to look it up. It's easy for me to do. I don't get distracted in the browser or opening up an Acrobat, right? But I was asking him, I was like, what do you do? And he says, well, here's my original book. And it's in a binder. It's in a 3-ring binder. And it has tabs on it for every section. And he's like, once the book started falling apart, I didn't feel that it was that big of a deal to drill 3 holes through it and then start putting markers on it for what sections are in the book. And I said, that's actually genius because that'll help you use it. Right? And you don't feel like you're destroying it because it's already fell apart, right? And he's like, this is the one I use. Now he says, I have a pristine copy that I don't use on the shelf, but this is the one. And he's like, it's funny. I'm almost interested in just buying copies to do this too. Right?
Yeah.
Smart guy.
I thought about the
really
same
smart
thing.
Guy.
Yeah, and some of this stuff, I mean, if I come across a deal that's too good to pass up, that's why I have 3 rule cyclopedias, right? Is because if I have something that's too good to pass up, regardless of condition, it's still perfectly playable or still perfectly something that you can use to just browse and read, or something you can give to the kids, or something that you can, rip apart and do whatever with. I've had a couple of DMGs, as a matter of fact, Orange Spine DMGs. They've been lost to the sands of time or whatever, or my own stupidity. But I'm sure you remember those little things that you would buy in a pack and you'd stick on the edge of the pages.
Yeah,
they'd be like red, yellow, the little clear
that's
things.
exactly what Evan did. Yeah, those are the markers I'm talking about. Yeah.
Right. And then you could flip through them. You can open to individual sections. It ruins the book, but if the book's already ruined, or you've decided to cut it out of its binding and punch it, and and that's what's really interesting is that a lot of the basic stuff, like Molve basic, was 3-hole punch.
Yeah, it was punched out of the
right
factory.
out of the box.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
which is
And I
awesome.
think that was,
Yep.
yeah, it's super awesome. And the first time I ever saw that, I'm like, wow, this is really weird, you know? Because way back then, I mean, I think we all remember, we probably all did the same thing. You would get the new module, they would have the map pages and DM reference or player reference pages right in the middle. You bend
Yep.
out the staples, take those pages out, split them, put squeeze the staples back, and I mean, I wonder how many like Keep of the Borderlands are sitting out there with no middle section.
Yeah, with half
Probably,
the module
probably
gone.
thousands.
Most of them.
Yeah, 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 probably. Opening
So
doors
one thing
is
I want to
covered
bring
in
up
detail. Yeah,
with the something that kind of came up a little bit ago, but I wanted to bring it up because I think it's important. Uh, there's a lot of stuff in AD&D that a lot of people just hand wave because they're like too complicated, too fiddly, too too much work, right? Um,
sure.
that I know you and I both are, let's just say, deeply interested in, right? Um, but it's for two reasons. It's not just because I want to use it at the table. Because to be honest with you, if something doesn't work for me at the table, it's gone, right?
Yeah,
And that may depend on who I'm playing with, right? It may
sure.
not just be me, right? Some people are just like, I don't like the way that you were doing initiative, right? I want to do initiative per side, or I want an individual initiative, or I want to be able to assign my bonus from my dexterity into the initiative, right?
Hmm.
Or whatever. And again, it's a negotiation, right? We're all playing. Everybody's playing at the table. So you have to come to a term where we have agreement on what the rules are. But a lot of those components, and again, it's the same stuff, right? It's weapon speed to hit versus armor class, armor type. The modifiers. If you think about it, right? What One of the things that really interests me isn't necessarily that it's complicated, because I don't care about complication, but what it does, what the
Right.
result of that actually means, right? Why does it matter? And I know a lot of people say Gary said, and I think it was even published, so it's probably true. Gary said that he felt that was probably his biggest failure, was to hit versus
Yeah.
armor type and weapon speed, right? Because it just slowed the game
Yeah,
down,
and
right?
yeah, even went so far as to say that there were some specific individuals of a wargaming mindset that got him to include those things against his better judgment. And I think I've nailed that down actually specifically to an individual named Jeff Key, who is credited almost nowhere else except as in relation to that, but that's as far as I've made it. But yeah,
Okay.
he said he was basically pressured into it, and and then that he just went along with it, and he regretted it. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
So the reason why I bring it up is because for me, there's a thought experiment there that needs to be done, right? So why is this there? I don't think Gary or many of the developers at that time just put stuff in to put stuff in. I.e., damn it, it's 5 pages short. I need 5 pages of
Right.
filler, right? So we're going to put this optional rule crap in there. So it meets, it's like, with a deck of cards, you're always doing 54. There's a reason for that, right? There's a manufacturing reason for that. But with
Hmm.
book, you can have it be 80 pages or 85 pages or 120 pages. And in fact, we see books now that are 500 plus pages, one book, right?
Oh yeah.
In the role-playing hobby, not just a dictionary, right? You know what I mean? Um, but there's a thought experiment there for why is it in there, right? And I got to tell you,
Right.
especially based on your code that you wrote back in the day, right, a couple of years ago, doing the testing
Yeah.
against class versus class with those rules added, those rules removed, right? That there is a significant delta in gameplay,
Huge.
right? It's massive, right? And in my honest opinion, a lot of people are like, the ranger's boring, the fighter's boring, right? All I do is I run up with my sword and shield and I hit something, right? And I argue,
Yeah.
yes, the way you're playing it is boring. And you have ways to solve that if you don't want to min-max, right? I.e., you don't have to use your longsword every time, right? You can use other weapons,
Right.
or you could do other things, maneuvers, right? Where you can say, I'm going to do full defense this round. That's in the rules, right? But the fact is, those rules make those classes, the martial ones, so much more
Yes.
rich. So many more
They
choices,
definitely do. Mm-hmm.
right? That matter. It's not just, well, the difference between me hitting you with a short sword and hitting you with a long sword is a long sword does potentially 2 more damage on a roll, right? That's the difference. Well, that's not actually the difference. If you use speed and you use, hit versus armor type, those actually matter. Right, and I know they're artificial, right? Somebody had to put a number down, and somebody said, okay, the longsword is probably better against this armor type, and maybe they have evidence of it, right? I mean, we definitely have evidence today of it, because there's all these guys that are doing these tests out there, right, with different types of armor and different types of weapons, and seeing what they do, right? Although I think there's probably data that you could have mined even in the 70s. For those things,
mm-hmm.
right? Just from what people actually used and whether they kept using them or not, right? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, because a weapon falls out of favor real quick if you just run out into the battlefield and are instantly slain in a horrific way.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, okay. No more peasants flail.
That's right.
We'll bury that one in underground, and we won't talk about it again.
Yeah. There's one battle in history that talks about the German Guten Tag, right? And that's the only one.
Right.
So I think it's not effective. It was obviously effective in that battle, but you don't see a whole lot of private use of that stuff. Right?
Well, they probably on the other side figured out right away. Okay, well, we figured out what didn't work, and then we figured out how to stop it completely to where it will never be a problem again. And then that's the last you hear of that. And there's so much. There's so much in what you just said. Is just those what appear to be on the surface mathematical differences and distinctions that seem pretty minor when you just glance at them add a richness, like you said, to the game that it would be hard to do otherwise with. And without it, we've talked about it many times, without those additional things, even if they were conversions, like weapon versus armor class was kind of a conversion of the man-to-man hit tables from ODD. But even if they're a conversion, it's almost like almost everything that ended up in AD&D was sort of meant to be there, regardless of the reason that it's there. And I don't know if it was the haste of putting together the material or just pure genius or what it was. It was almost just serendipitous that what we got was a full game system that, even though rough in spots and rough around the edges, and including a bunch of stuff that the creator himself says, don't bother with that, I wish I never had, really present a damn near perfect game. And the hand waving of that stuff bothers me as well, because it's like a lot of people say, some rules are load bearing rules, right? Like taking a load bearing wall out of your house or whatever, the whole thing collapses. But these things have been ignored for so long that they're not really considered that way anymore.
Yeah, and they're not even in the design, right? As far as they're concerned.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And and that's where I want to add to what you're saying about preserving those rules because they're there, but it's also preserving those rules for me at least because they aren't used. And if they're not used and all these books come out, and I don't want to pick on it in any particular way because it's done a lot for the hobby, but Old School Essentials, with their fantasy, old school, advanced fantasy or whatever it is, or even basic fantasy, advanced. I can't remember the names of the books at this moment because I don't play those games, not generally. But they leave out all of this stuff that made the original so compelling and add so much flavor to it that the original will eventually just never be remembered, and it's
That's
almost to that point.
Yeah.
You've got guys who have their original AD&D books. You've got guys who have bought reprints off of Drive-Thru RPG, and you got guys with PDFs. And that's all you have for the original mechanics of AD&D. And all it takes is for people to lose interest in that and to find other more modern ways to play that don't preserve the intricacies and nuance, that it'll just be gone forever.
Well, yeah, it's Mike Tyson's fade into Bolivia argument, right? It is really what it is. Right. Sadly, and here again, I argue for this not because it's complicated. D&D, especially AD&D, it's really not supposed to be a simulation, right? It's not a simulation. It is an approximation at best, right? Because a simulation, if you're not using computers, it's not a fun experience, right? At least it isn't for me. Where you're like, okay, well, it's been 6 hours since you went to the bathroom, so it's time for you to go, right? Well, wait a minute, I'm in the middle of a combat, right? I can tell you I've driven to Florida from Colorado. I can hold it if I have to.
That's a healthy drive. Yeah, that's a healthy drive right there.
Well, 30 hours, right? If I'm going from where I live to, Panama City
Pensacola.
Beach, right?
Right.
My point is though, it's not because it's complicated, and it isn't because I want a simulation. The reason why I like it is because now, think about it. If you take away those speed factors and the weapons versus armor type out of there, if you take it out, why does a fighter need so many weapon proficiencies? They really don't. You know why? You know why a fighter needs a weapon proficiency? Because they found a brand new magic item that's a different type that they want to use.
Right.
And that is it.
That's it.
But having that speed factor in there and having that weapons table with the modifiers for each type, that makes it like it actually has a flavor to it. It's not just rules for rules' sake, right? Oh, by the way, guy just walked in the door and he's got plate mail and a two-handed sword, right? Well, guess what? It's time for me to get the two daggers out, right?
Yes.
Because me at my first level, he's going to trounce me if I don't get rid of him very quickly, right? And now you can do it.
Right.
You can actually do it. How many attacks do I get? You might get quite a few, right?
Right. And there's so much intricacy in there that if you use it, and it's not impossible to use by any stretch of the imagination, and you don't necessarily have to use all of it if you don't want to, but some form it can be simplified, but some form of it is necessary to the game retaining the advanced moniker, right?
Yes.
Because if I'm going to play AD&D and I'm not going to use anything advanced that comes from it, then what am I actually using AD&D for? I'm using it for, classes, no classes race. Yeah. Different level advancement for demi-humans, strength and ability score, mins and maxes for those guys, different weapon damage, If you're not using weapon speed, I mean, that's really all you got is different weapon damage and rates of fire. Because if you're not using weapon speed factor, you're definitely not concerning yourself with weapon length or anything else.
Well, you're probably not
Like
even
that.
worried about the order of operations for the initiative at all, right?
Right,
To be
right. You may
honest.
as well not be. Yeah.
Yeah.
You may as well go fully grouped initiative. One side rolls a d6, other side rolls a d6, and you maintain that d6. You don't re-roll every round. You maintain that d6 throughout the combat, and nothing changes anything about it. And then that leads into the serious problem I have with that particular thing is that if you're going to do that, there is absolutely no reason. I mean, there's no reason whatsoever, regardless of what justification people have tried to give me, that the combat round should be a minute long.
Yes.
If all I can do is close the combat, charge, or make a single attack, all of those are ors, right?
Yes.
Then why is the combat round a minute? It doesn't have to be.
No.
You could say it's for abstraction and all that kind of stuff. It might take a minute in real time of running the game and trying to get the player on board with what you're trying to do or try to get your ideas out there toward the player or the character. But there's really no reason for that,
Right.
because there's just no point. And I know that the rules specifically say that that's what's there, but the example combat and the way that your actions were laid out in what should have been a fully segmented initiative round don't really present what other parts of the rules suggest are possible
That's right.
tactically. Right. And I think that's just the nature of the thing with how it was put together and how hastily it was done and for the reasons it was done and whatnot. But because you have sprinklings of segments through all types of important things, and if you don't use those, I mean, even in magic items and spells and weapons beyond just weapon speed factor, if you don't use those things or consider those things at least in some way, shape, or form, then it's really just a pretty flat experience, and you probably would be better served, playing something like Old School Essentials or BX or whatever, because it's more streamlined and gives you more guidance in terms of how these rules are capable of working together without the unnecessary complication that you're going to ignore anyway, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. And I, again, I don't just throw rules in because I want rules, right? Really, to
Right.
be honest with you, it's kind of almost an Occam's razor argument, right? That the simplest is the best, but it has to be the simplest, interesting solution is the
Yeah.
best,
Yeah.
right? Because honestly, I can bake a baked ziti every day. It's not interesting, right? But now, if I'm going to go in there and say, well, I'm going to put some green chili in there, and
Yes.
it's my purview to do it. And oh, by the way, well, now it's too soggy. I got to do something else to firm it up. That makes it a little more interesting, and I think that's what we're really talking about here, right? Is that it makes it
Right.
more interesting. I have heard, not recently, because to be honest with you, most of the people that play AD&D now either played back then and have been playing it for a long time, so they don't really care, or because they've adapted. But for the longest time, all I'd hear is, "This is boring." Well, it's boring because you're playing it boring. Let me help you out here. Take a look at these tables, right? Look at this, right?
Right.
You have not just options, but interesting options that matter. They make a difference,
They
but
do
you
make a
can't play
difference.
it that way by yourself, right? We all have to agree that this is the way it works. So
Hmm.
it could be the interesting solution for anyone at the table that has that problem, including the DM, right?
Right.
You know, so
Yeah, yeah, and I agree completely because so my favorite character to play, right? My favorite race and class is a human fighter, and there's probably many people like me. But now I can play in a game as a human fighter, and just hey, round starts, your initiative is 2. You're in combat range. Go ahead and make your attack. Oh, I roll. You miss. Okay, I'll wait till my next round, right? Which is fine and whatnot, but it's not nearly as interesting. It gets boring. Okay, it gets boring. Not as boring as rolling 2d6 and walking around a Monopoly board or something like that. But it does get boring compared to what it can be, and that's why things like 2E had successes because they at least codified some of that. At least in my opinion, they codified some of that complexity into the rules, although presented in a different, much more simplistic and unimaginative way from my perspective. But that's one of the reasons 3.5 and Pathfinder had such a gigantic following, is because there was complexity there, and you were able to understand at a glance what a character was capable of or not capable of, and how the characters and the weapons and the spells and the monsters and the challenge ratings and all of these things were different between the different groups rather than sameness. Because the fact of the matter is, there's not much difference if you're playing AD&D without using some of these things that we find in the rules that have been ignored. There's not much difference between playing a fighter and, say, a thief, except when it comes time for the thief to use his thief skills. Not much different playing a fighter versus a ranger, except when it comes time for the ranger to use his ranger skills. But what are the fighter's skills? What, he gets nothing?
it's the weapon
you know
proficiency. It's those weapon
Yeah,
proficiencies,
right.
right?
You get weapon proficiencies, and you can use whatever, and you can be a fighter because it's cool, and you don't, because sword and sorcery and all that, and you don't have to, you don't have, you'll get your 10% bonus experience for a prime requisite, and it's easy to qualify for, and you can advance to unlimited level as a human.
You
That's
know,
really the only thing that it's good for.
I agree. Yeah. Again, that's one of my arguments for the flavor, right? It just makes it more enjoyable. I'm the same as you, Dooms. I've played demi-humans less than 10 times in my entire
Yeah.
career, and most of that's recent. I played
Yeah,
humans
yeah,
and I played almost
same for me.
exclusively humans, and I rarely did multi-class or dual class, right? Humans.
Right.
Again, most of the time I was DMing, so I didn't play as a player, but I did play as a player,
Sure.
and I definitely play as a player more often than I DM now these days, right? So I prefer the human myself. It's just a
Yeah.
bias, and I'm not saying dwarves suck or elves suck. I'm just gnomes do suck, but I the humans are the ones that I actually prefer, right? Uh, so yeah, I'm in that same boat, and I do what you said regarding the why is the paladin so much better than a fighter? Well, it's really not, right? I mean, yes, it levels slower, sure, but really in the big picture, um, it's only because the fighter's been hampered, right?
Right.
By the ignorance of these rules, these special rules that really can make it
Yeah.
so much more interesting. So
Yeah, and I agree with that completely. I mean, yeah, you do move over to even Unearthed Arcana attempted, with the weapon specialization, double weapon specialization, and these kinds of things. But that's not really what was needed. yeah, that sort of patched over the fighter being a substandard character, but it didn't really patch over him being an uninteresting the character as compared to others. And yeah, for me, but I way back in the day, I would play a dwarf on occasion, but it was always human. Other than that, and I'm not sure that, and mostly I've DM'd, over the last decades, but I'm not sure that I don't think I have. I don't think I've ever played a multi-class character. Um, now in 3.5, even in 3.5, I've never splashed a level and stuff like this. It's always, a particular character class and a particular race moving straight through the progression. And it's unfortunate that fighters end up the way they do. Even clerics, yeah, you've got
Yep.
some flexibility with choice of deity, some flexibility with choice of spells and all that sort of thing. But bringing weapon speed factors and weapon versus armor type, or weapon versus armor class, or whatever you want to call it, into the equation actually makes everyone's weapon choice matter.
Yep.
You know,
Way better.
And
Right. Then the
yeah,
dagger dart
yeah,
staff for your mage or your magic user, right? It isn't just like, well, crap. Listen, man, you choose a dagger and you might get to go first, right? Against that kobold.
right,
And maybe not die. Right?
yeah, yeah,
You know what I
and
mean?
maybe
It
not die.
matters.
Exactly.
It matters. So yeah. So I wanted to step back a minute because I did want to comment about something you had said regarding 3.5 or 3.7.5. I got to tell you,
Yeah,
a lot of people say it's not D&D. I disagree. It's different. No argument. It's different.
it is
But
different.
it is probably the most deterministic version of the rules with only the dice really adding randomness, right? And it's amazing. It really is, because you don't have that analysis paralysis where people are like, well, what do I do? Well, it's on your sheet.
Right.
Now, maybe later you have analysis paralysis because you got 50 things you could do, right?
Yes. Yes.
But you know what? It's probably as deterministic as I would tolerate, right?
Same.
Any more deterministic than 3.5 or 3.7.5, and I'd probably be like, yeah, not so much for me, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I agree with that. I think they took it to as far as they could take it, and by that I mean, or with that I mean, with the core rule books, right? Same thing with Pathfinder core. I like all the other Pathfinder stuff, and I have a bunch of it for 1E. I've got the core
Me
book
too.
for 2E, but I've got all the bestiaries and the advanced player's guide and the advanced class guide, advanced race guide, all that stuff, because I just liked the way they published them. I liked the artwork. I liked the writing and stuff. But typically, I wouldn't use those any more than I would use, some other things from 3.5. Now, some of the splat books in there, Ultimate, what is it? The Ultimate Arcane or something like that. The ultimate books that they had in 3.5 for the warrior and the wizard and the priest and stuff. There was some good stuff scattered through those. You kind of had to pick and choose. But
Yes.
yeah, from a determinism standpoint, I think that's as far as you could take it without it getting so far in the weeds that it becomes much less interesting. I
Yeah,
mean,
this
they gave
becomes a
us
story game, right?
graded play.
Versus a role
Right.
playing game, right?
Mm-hmm.
I tell you what, was
And
the go ahead, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that they gave us pretty much everything that we needed to determine whether or not realistically within the game rules, because I don't want it to be a simulation either. Realistically and in a simplified form of what you might be able to do and why or why not, and kind of an ability to perceive as a player the potential for success or failure in that action. And I think
That's
they
right.
did it really well.
They did. It's excellent. It's an excellent rule set. I still like AD&D better, solely because it's more
Right, me
flexible.
too.
But in a lot of ways, I find that the 3.5 plus stuff fits very, very well, and I'd be more than willing to play it. It's not something I dislike. It's just different.
Right.
It's not bad. It's different.
It's definitely different. I agree with that completely.
One of the things that kind of twisted me a bit earlier on, I most people probably don't even know this, but back in the day, and even recently, they had a re-release. There was a game called Torg, right?
Yeah,
I don't know how many people actually played Torg. It had cards, right? And that kind of turned people off, right?
Right.
But I got to tell you, that is about as not AD&D as you can get, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's something to it that changed how I felt about gaming a little bit. TTRPGs.
Yeah, right.
That happened with Torg. Having those cards come up and give players advantages, and not the advantage in the 5e means of advantage or the D20 means, but if you do something different, there's a bonus for you.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I was like, why had this not come up before? Right? This is one of those situations people are like, well, all I do is the same thing because I'm min-maxing my round. Well, now I have an incentive to do something else that also min-maxes my round. Right?
Right.
And I got to tell you, I'm actually surprised that went nowhere else. Right?
Yeah.
It's not. I have not seen it in any other rules.
Right. And I found it. I also found it fascinating because there was a sort of randomness and anything could happen that really tied in well to the universe and the campaign guides and stuff, because Torg had all those books and stuff, and now I realize my Ziploc bag of Torg cards had a hole in it, so I've got Torg cards all over the floor.
Well, it's from the 90s at the very latest, right?
Yeah, the Ziploc bag is in bad shape. But yeah, there was something there about that that added to the experience and made it less static. And I think that anytime we can add sort of dynamic things into the games that we play, we should be interested in at least looking at those and seeing if there's something that we find personally worthwhile. Because I really like that too.
The part of it is you want. So why do people find Monopoly monotonous, right? And I'm not even talking about the rules or house rules or it lasts 4 hours or I went bankrupt and everybody else is playing and I'm sitting here watching. Not even talking about that. The reason why it's monotonous is because you roll a die and there aren't interesting decisions to be made every round. Right? What decision you made? Well, I landed on a property. I could buy it or not buy it. Maybe I can't buy it because I don't have the money, so I don't even have that choice. But for the most part, it's because you don't always have interesting decisions to make. Right?
Right.
This applies for role-playing as well. Right? Why does that person sit on the phone while they're not in fight? Well, because they know all I'm going to do is roll this die and roll the damage, and the cool part is, did I hit? It's not, what did I do? If it's what did I do, they're going to be thinking about what they're going to do. And that mechanic they had in Torg gave you other things to do, and enough of a bonus to make it possible, right? Even if you weren't good at it. Do you know what I mean? And I think really ultimately, for me, I want my round to have interesting decisions to be made every round.
Yeah,
right?
I agree. Good point.
And that's the thing, right? So again, that's the same reason why I have the same argument with weapon speed to hit versus armor class. Issues with my dwarf can't go to level infinity as a fighter, right? Or can't be a cleric at all, right? Those are interesting challenges to cope with. And now all I need to have is those same level of interesting challenges that I'm doing when I'm creating the character as I'm running the combat round, as I'm running the adventure that's out of combat. I want those. And I think we have less challenges with out of combat, right? Because the flow's different, right?
Sure.
People role play, right? You don't see a lot of people role playing in combat, although I would disagree. In your case, you do. Right, you always have a statement to make, or you've got
that's what I like.
Adversarial statements, or maybe they're not even adversarial in your case, right? But most people, when it's time for the combat, it's the dice come out and the brain turns off, right? And I don't want their brain to turn off. I want their brain to stay lit, because then they're engaged and they're enjoying it, and they don't find that other thing, the hockey game on the TV or their phone, to be interesting enough to interfere. Right?
Right.
And that's where I'm coming with this whole thing. That's my whole perspective on it. Because initially, back in the day, like we were saying earlier, it was you played by the rules. And if you had trouble understanding the rules, then you did whatever you have to do to get past it. Right? And play that way. But in a lot of times, you just get in this rut where you're like, well, I'm a fighter. I'm going to be in the front, right? Or I'm the I'm the thief, and I'm going to be scouting ahead, right? And I'm going to be disabling stuff. But really, it's sad that the interesting decisions disappear. And with 3.5 especially, that really didn't happen.
No, it couldn't happen. If it happened, then you, as the player, because we had players like that, and I'm sorry if I cut you off, but way back in the day, in the early days of 3.5, we ran through players like that, no problem. This was all back face to face type of stuff, but they'd show up, and one guy, he might smoke too much or something, and just and just sit there, and then and then his character just dies. We had this other guy who would sit on his iPod. There was a bigger iPod that came out that would be horizontal, and I'll remember this, and he'd sit on that thing, and he would just sit on that thing until his turn came, and then he would have no idea what was going on, and there were actual consequences for that.
Right.
And there, with the way that AD&D and other D&Ds are run now, that's not so much the case. And a big part of that, I think, is eliminating the complexity from within the combat round. Because unless you, typically in an AD&D game, unless you decide to role play during combat, which is about the only fun you're really going to have, other than rolling a d20, maybe twice if you're lucky. That's all there is to do, and and that's fine. But I don't really feel like that's what it was meant to be. Whether or not. Well, let's look at it this way. Let's go back to the old Dragon magazines. And I had talked to Great Old Ones on one of his videos about it. And I've talked to him several times, and he's talked to me about it in that same series. You look back into older Dragon magazines, say even from, I don't know, issue, I'll just throw an arbitrary number out there. Basically anything that came before 2E, right? And even leading up into 2E. In fact, but you look at those older Dragon magazines, and nobody was afraid of complexity. All of the best articles were articles diving into minutia that made you feel like, that made me feel like, even though I was really sort of drawn into the mechanical aspects of the game. These guys made me look completely well adjusted, because they would come out with stuff that that was really, really advanced and really digging into minutia. And those articles were heralded as things that eventually made their way into the game or into house rules or whatever the case would be. And they were considered worthy enough to be put into Dragon Magazine, which was the premier sort of between book publishing vehicle of TSR at the
Right.
time. You would find articles like "How many coins in a coffer," which I love, because the guy goes through all kinds of detailed math to figure out the cubic volume of an individual coin, and how many are going to fit in various components. You've got even way back, you've got "How heavy is my giant?" That's just deep into lore. You've got Len Lakofka's stuff where he goes through completely alternate initiative systems that really do make every single combat round count and every single segment count. And those are all published in Dragon. And in the case of Len's stuff, most of that stuff was run by Gary, and Gary was like, yeah, go ahead, and now it's almost like the flattening out of the game is sort of part of what people find nostalgic about it or something, because of the introduction of complexity in later editions and complexity being bad. But there's definitely nostalgia to AD&D for me and for everybody else who played it, tons. But the nostalgia, you don't play it just for the sake of saying that I play AD&D because I'm old school, right?
Right. Yeah, you're not some hipster that showed up today and wants to show his cred, right? Don't get me wrong. There's a place for that, I guess. I'm not that guy, but there's a place for that. But to be honest with you, you don't have to like AD&D. It's totally okay. In fact, I got a friend of mine that I grew up with, moved overseas now. He loved AD&D, but his preferred rule set is 3.5, right? He's like, if I was going to play again, this is what I'd play. Now, he's in the middle of a place where he doesn't have people to play with. I'm like, you have the internet, dude. You have people to play with, right? You just got to find the group, right? And that's not as easy as it seems all the time. But he was an AD&D guy, but he likes 3.5, and I'm totally cool with that, right? You pick your poison, but I have to agree with you on the creativity, right? I mean, I remember the first time I saw the ecology of.
Yes.
And I'm like, wait a minute. So this really isn't about rules. Well, but it kind of is. It kind of is, right?
Yeah, right.
And I was like, somebody said this is not well understood, so I'm creating it. And what stops me? Who's stopping me from doing that? Right?
Yes.
It doesn't matter if that's how it really was intended to be. Right? It really doesn't.
It doesn't matter at all. Exactly. Yeah. And it really is about the creativity. And if you take, if somebody decides, hey, you know what, all of this stuff, all this weapon speed factor and all of this weird stuff doesn't belong in there, but comes out with a system that replaces it in such a way that still makes the combat round or anything else that happens in a sort of its own little microcosm within the game, if they end up making that as interesting or more interesting than those things that they've removed, then I'm all for it.
Absolutely.
But what we tend to see is not so much that. Now the OSR, of course, being largely based on BX, seems to do a better job of introducing those types of ideas into the game than most people who play AD&D or base their stuff on AD&D tend to do, which is it's a real shame to me, because I think that I think the AD&D is my favorite version of the game, and I would like to see it. Once again, I'm just pounding the dead horse, right? It's there's so much there that instructs you how to make it interesting, and most of it, it gets thrown out with no replacement.
Right. And in the for the benefit of expediency, right? For the benefit of expediency, which I mean, maybe there's a place for it. But here, when I go, and sadly, I mean, it's not as much as I'd like, right? And it's not for as long as I like. But when I go to my face-to-face game and I sit at the table with those guys, I honestly don't care how long any of it takes, because you know what? I'm just glad to be there with those guys.
Yeah.
And if we were playing Monopoly or AD&D, I'm going to have more fun playing AD&D, but I'm just glad to be there and that those guys are there, and we can spend that time and have that social interaction, right? And it's just, as long as it's interesting, right? As long as it's not everybody's really burned out from work and really not interested in doing a whole lot of anything, and we just sit there, flipping coins or something. It never happens, but I'm just saying that might be the only time where I'm like, well, maybe we need to pump those numbers up, right? But in honesty, does expediency matter to me at the table? I don't know if it does. Not in AD&D.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm thinking about that myself as you're talking about it, and it reminded me of something instantly. Okay, expediency doesn't matter to me. I was like, yeah, I agree, it doesn't matter. And then I was like, I always am sad when it's over, and the more expedient it is, maybe the more stuff you've done. But I don't think that it's about the amount of stuff you've done that makes you sad as much as it is about the idea that, hey, this was great. And then I immediately thought, when I get the opportunity to go down to the Florida Keys, I go down to the Florida Keys for a few days or whatever. And when I have to, or the Bahamas or whatever, even when I used to travel in the United States or Mexico or whatever, when it was time to come back, I was like, oh, bummer, and that's how I feel about good RPG sessions, whatever the game is. But if those games aren't necessarily interesting in the first place, or at least able to hold your attention for a long period of time, then you don't necessarily have that same feeling. So expediency of the turn and the round and what everybody's doing in D&D is less important to me than the holistic experience, and whether I wish that it could continue and can't wait to come back to it.
Yes. Yeah. It's exactly the experience I have. And don't get me wrong, I'm always sad to leave, right? I'm always sad to leave. Even when I'm like, I need to leave, I'm going to be tired soon. And I got an hour to drive.
Right.
But at the same time, I'm sad that I'm leaving. And I will tell you, some of the best sessions aren't the sessions that have all the accomplishments. Right? I mean, it's cool when you're like, I finally, because I'm kind of a completist as a player, right? Now, in AD&D, that's not necessarily a good trait, right? but
yes, I understand.
But at the same time, it's kind of cool when you're like, we finally found all the rooms on all the rooms we could find on the level. Right, we cleared the level.
Yes,
to the level, to the best of our ability. Obviously, it needs to be a living world, so it's cleared for how long? Right? I'm like Mr. Incredible. Can't the level be saved just for 5 minutes? Right?
Right.
But sometimes those are like, wow, there's a lot, and it's not as pleasant, right? Because it feels like you're just grinding through it. And other
Grinding.
times,
Yeah.
like, you have an interaction and the entire session is in one room. And you're
Hmm.
like, man, that was spectacular. Right? And if we had
Agreed.
rushed through that, we wouldn't even know how sad that would be. Right?
Right. Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and that's part of the enjoyment of being a completionist with it, because there's a lot of times, particularly with regard to older materials and stuff like that, there could be entire sections of dungeons or wilderness areas or anything like this that weren't critical to the
Right?
story
Yep.
or to the completion of the adventure or the task set out in the adventure, but they added so much. Let's just at a real base level, the low hanging fruit, right? Keep on the Borderlands. If you go into Keep on the Borderlands and you're in the Keep, you go to the Caves of Chaos, come back to the Keep, go to the Caves of Chaos. You never explore the Lizard Man mounds, you never find the Mad Hermit, and you never do anything outside of sort of
Okay.
the basic
Yeah.
linear box. And then say you leave alone half of the caves and just go right to the cultists or whatever you do. Um, you've lost part of the experience, you know.
Yes. Well, and that's something I want to bring up too. That is a design. It is not an accident. That is an
Right.
intentional design, right? Where they're like,
Hmm.
look, there are things the players may not find. And today, designers are like, well, I designed it. I want the players to do it. No.
Yes.
If you can't miss anything, you're missing a lot of it. Do you get what I mean? If
Agreed.
it's inevitable that you find every single encounter, if you choose to find it, right? Then what is the point? What is the point of that one time where the elf walks by and his passive ability detects the damn secret door?
Yes.
Where
Yes.
you wouldn't have looked there. I'm sorry, you just wouldn't have. It's not in a place that makes sense, right?
Right.
And I don't get me wrong. I understand the drive because I've built my own adventures, and I'm like, look, I made some really cool encounters here, and I would be
Yes.
sad
Yes.
if the party did not see it. But the fact
Right.
is, if they can see it all, and it takes no intelligence, the exploration factor of the game is diminished greatly. Right? You have to have that
Absolutely.
opportunity to miss stuff. Right?
You definitely do. And you know, ironically, I guess, being that they were, that most of them were inspired by D&D and AD&D and other RPGs. Video games from a certain era seem to do that a little bit better, right? You could make your way through the entire game and complete all the objectives of the game without being a completionist.
Yes.
And I think mostly, uh, and I'm sure I'm going to give credit and not give credit to other people who did the same, but Gary gave us those designs, right? In all of his modules, there it was almost as if he laid out a blueprint that said, "Hey, this is everything that's involved within the scope of this game, and you can do as much or as little of it as you want, and the module does not care." And
Right.
and you as the DM should not care.
You
It's
should
up to
only
the
care that you're
players how much
prepared.
they want to care.
Right?
Yeah, that's it.
That's it.
Right.
And you know what? The DM guide has all you need to prepare for that thing that went sideways, where the guys are like, "Oh, there's an exit here in the dungeon. Well, I'm going out the exit." No, you're not
You're
done.
right.
There's still stuff to do. No, I'm going.
Yeah.
There's a copse of trees over there I really want to see. Right? Well, shit,
Uh-huh.
it's not in the adventure. Well, but it
Right.
is in the DM guide.
Yeah,
If you are
exactly.
really under duress, the data is there. And again, it isn't necessarily the encounter that matters. It's how you play it. Right?
Right. Absolutely.
So using random tables doesn't diminish the experience if you're willing to expand yourself to make it worthwhile and not just treat it as a random encounter. Right? Well, it's a throwaway encounter.
Right.
In fact, Gary even tells you, don't random encounter. Right? As players, don't random encounter. You don't want to do that. It hurts. Right? But at the same time, right?
Yeah.
One, you may not have a choice. The DM decides. Right? And sometimes the dice decide. Right?
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean,
even before
it's there.
Yeah, and before we had the because nowadays there's a ton of supplements that provide you, especially over time, with the point we're at now, through history, there's a ton of supplements that give you all the rollable tables you would ever possibly need to use under any circumstances,
Absolutely.
But even before that, there was nothing wrong with just improvising. Okay, so
That's right.
you want to go out to the forest, you want to. Some of my favorite times as DM, even though they were particularly challenging, would be just have people want to play. I have nothing prepared. I have nothing that I'm going to run. But I do have some big maps out of some box sets, and hey, okay, you guys are going to explore the ruins of Mitranor. I have no idea what's in there. Half the shit's not keyed, and I'm not reading the books and prepping this because the guys are going to be here in 45 minutes. So you sit there, you grab your map, you set up your area, and you think and think and think, and then they go, and as they proceed through the thing, you work off of them, they work off of you, and you put something together with just a basic knowledge of the rules that actually ends up being amazingly interesting if you let your imagination run.
That's right.
But rollable tables make it even easier.
You have rollable tables.
Always give you
and then you have the geomorphs to do it. Like I don't have a map, guys. Well, do you need a map? Well, yes. Right. You need to have a rational campaign, right? So, I guess you could just play willy-nilly, and the world is just rubber, and there's no consequences, or I mean, you could play that way, and I'm sure it's fun in some cases. But you just got to come up with a premise, and you can roll it as you go. You're like, okay, well, they want to do a hex crawl. Okay, well, all I have to come up with is what is the major interesting things there. Maybe three things. 3 in the whole hex. The rest is generated.
Right.
But, there's Kuatoa here. And those Kuatoa are disrupting the wildlife, and the druid sect that's in the hex is having trouble, and they need your help. Done. The rest of it could be random. Right?
Right.
You know what I mean? And you play with your players. That's the people you're playing with. You're not playing with the books. You're playing with the players. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree completely. And I think the players with a good DM and whatnot, they'll understand that they're playing off the DM and playing with the DM as well. You bring up I've talked to you a lot before in the past, my friend, but you're an incredible philosopher on the game, and and I love it because some of the points you bring up are very, very well put. And I like that a lot. Wanted to get down to here real quick if I'm not cutting anything off. So Joe plays with Mark.
Grimsby.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about? It's Grimsby?
I think that's what he's talking about. Yeah, with Mark. I think so.
I liked Mark a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Mark was a great guy. Well, is a great guy as
He's a
long as
great
he's
guy.
still
Yeah.
with us, you know. Yeah,
Just haven't
and
interacted with him much lately, but yeah.
yeah, yeah. I haven't spoken to him much, but he was oh, they both do. Wow. Well, thanks for showing up here, because and yeah, we both, I think, we both really enjoy playing with Mark, and something that I really like about Mark is that he was of that similar mindset. That the rules as written give you something to work with that's far beyond what you would get with just leaving out things that you're not interested in, or things that you think might slow down your game or might not be included. And Mark's one of the people who has been traditionally willing to talk with me about, stuff where everybody else is like, why do you even care about this, man? Yeah, but he cares. And yeah, and I really like that, and I've enjoyed it. Tell him I said hey, by the way.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I miss the dude, and I got to tell you, I respect his play, and that's not often said by me. That's not something I say lightly.
Right,
Right, I respect his
right.
play. He was amazing, and I was sad when he had to depart, and I understand it given my own circumstance. Right, I understand it fully, but yeah, that's one of those things, right? That again, somebody drifts into your life, you play a stupid game with them, and then you split off because that's life, but you still remember that guy, and more than you would have remembered to somebody that you had met at the soccer field while you're watching your kids play, even though he's your neighbor. Right? So,
Right.
all I'm saying. So yeah, that's amazing. The random stuff works for
Yeah.
me. It really does. And I will tell you, especially at the end, before I went to college, we were almost entirely ad hoc. We were not running any planned campaign of any kind. The only thing that was set was the world. The setting was there, and that was it. Right? The players could go wherever the hell they want. They could do whatever the hell they want. As a DM, I would just roll with it. Right? And I got to tell you, that was probably most of the best fun times, because there was no prescription I had to turn in. Right? And there was no
Right.
prescription the players had to turn in. There was no expectation that they had to save a princess, unless that's what they decided to do. Right? Which is amazing.
Yes, yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah. So he brought somebody into AD&D, huh?
That's pretty amazing.
Oh,
Well, I mean,
yeah,
you have. I know I have. Right?
yeah,
Not that big,
yeah.
not that many, because I'm basically a hermit. Right? I'm that mad hermit you didn't visit and keep in the Borderlands. But yeah, I mean, that's amazing. I'm glad to hear, actually. And every once in a while, I'll see something from him, but it's not often, which is kind of sad.
It, yeah, yeah, same thing. I mean, I know I could hit him up whenever I wanted to, but you end up in a situation, particularly with Discord and stuff like that, where it's just like, hey, if somebody's not trying to reach me, well, kind of like how I don't typically call people on the telephone. They usually call me, because it's like, why do I want to talk on the telephone? But then I get in something like this with you, and I could talk my face off for the next until I fell asleep in this chair. You know what I'm saying? He's he's the raw DM, as well he should be. Yeah.
You guys got any questions that specific? I know there are a few coming up in the channel here, but
Yeah, I'm just throwing them all up, but yeah, it's hard. It's hard when we're talking. It's hard to pay attention and answer these things, but I'm happy to answer questions as well.
yeah, one of the things I try to break the ice with, because as you know, as a player that played D&D back in the day, nerd was the label, and that was the friendly
Yeah.
label. There were other labels, but that was the friendly label,
Hmm.
nerd. But now, you were stating, why do you care about that, right? And
Yeah.
people give you a certain look when they're thinking that, And I always try to retort before they're able to comment when they give me that look, and I'll say, "Yes, stinky nerd," or "You smelly nerd," right? And they're like looking at me like, "Wait, how did you know?" I'm like, "I know what that look like. I know what it means, dude."
Right.
You're like, you're off the rails, right? You want to,
right. Right.
talk about computer security stuff and role playing stuff and board games. I am definitely in that lane, right? And most of my interactions are with people that are looking at me like, "What the hell is wrong with you? Why does this matter so much?"
Yeah. I tell people often, you get me in a game of Hero Quest or even like Arkham Horror or something like that, just a board game. I'm role playing the board game.
Hey, why not? Why the hell not? What's the loss? What do you lose?
Right. Open the door, wizard. What are you waiting for? Because it's fun. It's fun, and it keeps you, man, it keeps you feeling young, at least maybe.
Right, and it brings interest to other players. So regarding Joe's house rule, I know he asked this a few times.
Yeah.
I'll make a comment. There's a few things. So I generally do not use encumbrance because it's encumbering. But if I find that I'm being abused, then it goes in, right? So, if I look at somebody's character sheet and they have 4 weapons on their sheet, I'm like, where are those? Right? Oh, there's 2 suits of armor? So where's the pack mule? Right? Because this doesn't make sense. So that's one of the house rules. I generally don't use encumbrance unless it's obvious that it's being abused. Right?
Right.
One of the challenges with that is, however, part of the interesting thing of AD&D is, how the hell do I get this huge pile of stuff out of here without losing it all? Right? So there are cases. Another thing I generally don't do, unless there's a specific reason for it to be there, is I don't worry about biological functions or food or things of that nature, because I don't want the game to get derailed with minutia, uninteresting minutia, right? So I don't tell my players that, hey, it's been a while since you hit the head, right? So
right.
A little trickle running down your leg. I'm not doing that, right? It's not interesting. Now there are cases, like if you're going to do a survival kind of campaign, like with Dark Sun kind of things, or if you're going to have it be, areas that have, let's just say, reduced resources, then yes, I'll pull that stuff in. Right? Water matters now because you can't just go get it.
Right.
Right? So
yes,
for the most part, those are the house rules. Now, as you know, as I said before, it's possible that I could play with my game group with weapon speed and segments and hit versus armor class, and it just depends, right? That is something it's kind of like some people's opinions on AI, right? They just hate it. They don't care if it's any benefit at all. I'm not using it. I don't want to use it. We're not using it. And I mean, that's one of those tables that has that kind of level of unhappiness. Then we'll not use it, right? I'd rather play and not use it than not play, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So those are the kind of rules. Really, for the most part, though, I don't. House ruling the game it's like telling a lie, right? Telling an important lie. Like I was in the Navy SEALs when I was growing up, right? Once you tell a lie like that, you have to maintain it from then on, right?
Especially in the Navy SEALs, I'd imagine.
Well, I wasn't in the Navy SEALs. That was an example of a lie. But my point is that those house rules come with some pretty significant baggage. So I don't really use house rules unless something really bothers me. Right? like the
Right.
game isn't, things aren't working correctly for some reason with this group, right? So I got to find out what that is, and then maybe I do a patch, right? Like, I had a campaign recently where we were using some of the Oriental Adventures rules in our regular AD&D Greyhawk campaign. Now, that's not the same as house rules, to be honest, because they're codified already. But there are consequences to it, right?
Yeah,
That
for
the
sure.
weird might come out of it, right? And that's why I try not to do too many house rules, right? I try to keep it very, very limited.
Yeah, same here. Things like encumbrance and whatnot, I'll use those as much as the players are willing to accept those. You know, I don't typically require people to uh, track every single thing, but I find that the players who are interested in that are the ones who are going to do that anyway. Right. So, like, if I create a character, yeah, I try to make sure if I'm a player in a game, I try to make sure that I've purchased absolutely everything that I need for my expedition. I know exactly how much it weighs. It's all in its specific place. And because that's an aspect of the game that I enjoy as a player. If somebody else doesn't enjoy that as much, I'm not going to force the idea on them more than maybe going so far as to say, well, you know, do you have this or whatever? If they're trying to use something special under special circumstances, as far as where they're going to, go do number two or whatever, yeah, I don't really mess with that or any of that stuff. I do like to use weapon versus armor class. I'm not going to force it on anybody because, like Kev said, if there's, if I've got the possibility of 5 players and 3 of them are like, "Hey, we're not playing." If you do that, then I'd rather just have my 5 players than 2 who want to do things the way that I want to do them. I don't. Yeah, I don't have a problem with weapon specialization and some of the things out of Unearthed Arcana. I really don't have a problem with anything being brought into the game that's written down somewhere in AD&D as long as me and the player involved can get behind the idea. Back in the 3.5 days, and this isn't really an answer to a house rule question, but back in the 3.5 days, my rule was always, hey, if you buy the book and you bring it to me and we look at it together, we'll figure out a way to make it work because you went out and you bought that book. And I would say the same thing for AD&D. Where I mostly house rule things are sort of within a larger rule, and only if I think it's going to work and make it more fun for the players. So I like to be a lot more flexible on what you can possibly do during a combat round specifically in terms of, hey, this thing is 10 seconds long or 10 segments long, so 60 seconds long, 10 6-second segments long, and each one of those segments has something that might happen within it. So I have a sort of intricate process that I use to figure that out and where everybody's going at the time, and I don't lock them down to, hey, you can move into combat or close into combat or attack if or you can close into combat, you can charge, or you can attack if you're already in a combat engagement zone with your opponent. I don't like to limit it to that because, again, with the round being 1 minute long, that assumes to me that if you are not engaged with an opponent that can instantly strike you if you move around or something, getting what I guess would be later called an attack of opportunity, then you should be able to move. You should be able to do more than, okay, well, this round I'm going to pull out a potion. Okay. Next, I don't like that. And even Gary himself in the Dungeon Master's Guide, or whoever wrote these particular parts, talks about, hey, so you're going to pull out a potion. Yeah, that might take, if you've got it readily available in a belt pouch, that might take a segment. If you have to dig it out of a backpack, that might take 5 segments or even an entire round. Such and such segments for pulling the backpack off, such and such segments for sheathing your sword. And that's so I just really like to use segments as capably and as intelligently as I can think of to use them. And I've got some rules for doing that. The other thing that I do is with stuff that's generally stuff that's considered at will, or stuff that I don't let somebody cast 2 spells in a round. I won't let them do that. I won't let them make more attacks than their attack rate gives them, except under special circumstances, being surprised and such, although those are in the rules too. But I don't have any particular, if a magic user happens to have 2 wands, I don't have any particular problem with a magic user being able to use a wand in each hand, for example, each with a segment cost. I don't have any particular problem with monsters doing the same thing. If something's an at-will thing, then I am under the impression that it means exactly what it says. You do that at will. And not just that it's not tracked, but more than that it's at will. It's something that's negligible in the amount of time it takes. So it would take a segment, but that wouldn't preclude you from being able to do another sort of unrelated thing at the same time. It kind of goes more into sort of a 3.5 thing, in my opinion, because I kind of like that complexity in the combat round. So that's where most of my house rules are within the combat round itself, and what a player character, or a monster for that matter, might be able to do during that full minute of time. So that's basically my answer. That's a really good idea. I'd love to talk to Mark if he's ever interested on popping up on here. I'd love it. Unfortunately, specialization encourages eye attack. Yes, right. It's not an interest, especially if you don't use weapon versus armor type and whatnot, right? So, and that was a common case, especially in 2E. I mean, we would play with the bludgeoning, slashing, piercing, and the weapons, how they would relate to those armor types, which was a real simplification of weapon versus armor class or whatever in AD&D. But yeah. Once everybody becomes specialized, or even worse, double specialized, or even better, I guess I could say, the push to use any other weapon other than your bastard sword. And let's be honest, if you're using weapon specialization and double weapon specialization especially, there's really no better combatant than a male human. Well, it could be female too. A human fighter with the bastard sword, right? And you almost have no reason to use anything else.
Yeah, the only reason would be I found a longsword that has magic that's really, really beneficial compared to this bastard sword I have. Right? But if you think about it, double specialization's huge. Right? It is a massive uplift to your power. So it would have to be pretty damn good. Right? Because you're losing attacks per round as well as other things. It's, you know what I mean? So, That's why I'm saying I don't think that's a good replacement for weapon versus armor type. It's still a good rule in my opinion. Especially since it's somewhat restricted, right? Like later you can't just decide, well, I'm going to specialize now. Right? You specialize at first level or you don't. Right?
Right.
So, But
And that brings up a interesting point about the weapon proficiencies too, because there's a certain thing that you have to do in order to allow that to happen the way, right? So with weapon proficiencies being mostly useful, as I found a longsword and I've got a free proficiency. What that requires you to do is to say that, okay, well, you have this latent talent buried somewhere back in your mind, and you happen to find this sword, and now you're an expert at it, even though typically you use a spear and a hand axe.
yeah, you never got
So
trained on it, right? And you didn't do the Conan thing
right,
on the side of the mountain swinging a sword all day. So
yeah, right,
somehow
right, exactly.
you've unlocked that magical capability and potential of your being, right?
yeah, yeah, right.
I mean, I think it's inferred that when you get a new weapon, yeah, it's because you leveled, right? And that's because you went through the training, right, to get that new proficiency. I think that's implied by the rules. It's not stated explicitly, though, I don't think, anywhere. Right, where you
Right.
have to go get training for that new weapon proficiency. At least I don't recall that. Right? I'm my memory's not awesome in this respect. So
Yeah. I don't think that there's any specific mention that, I think that's one of those areas that just kind of left, sort of left alone. Um, and some DMs will say, yeah, you can save your weapon proficiency. Some DMs will say, no, you can't. So you never really know what you're getting.
right,
But with weapon versus armor class, there's a whole lot more incentive to fill up those proficiencies, regardless of the class, right? I don't care if you're getting 2 or if you're getting 4. There's a lot more reason to use those, so it becomes less of a issue,
right,
right?
yeah,
Attack of
and it won't
opportunity take
necessarily
you.
always be the max weapon damage, right?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
I'm fighting bandits, right? That's our campaign, is finding bandits. Well, uh, I'm not sure the longsword's what you want. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah,
Based
exactly,
on how they're
exactly.
outfitted, right? But yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. I like the creativity that goes into the decision making for that, and it definitely makes me feel like I have an important decision to make every round, right? So
Right, right. Yeah, so there's not specifically, obviously, the concept of attack of opportunity in AD&D itself, but I don't feel like that the attack of opportunity. So no, generally, if somebody runs away from somebody and somebody else is in that same combat engagement zone, is what I typically call it. If they're in a combat engagement zone and opponent A runs away from opponent B, I don't count opponent B's strike or automatic strike potential against opponent A as his attack for the round,
I'm the same.
because yeah, the attack is something different. Your one chance of attacking involves a lot of maneuvering and taking advantage of It's a planned attack that develops over time. Whereas if a guy turns his back and runs, I have no problem with a fighter who only gets 1 attack per round making an additional attack. And I don't mind 3.5 system of opportunity attack. I think it's actually kind of clever, of opportunity attacks and having something like combat reflexes, which means that you can make more than one. I think it's fairly elegant.
Yeah,
Um,
same with the cleave system, right? I really like it.
right, right.
But yeah, in this
Yeah,
case, I'm the exact same way, right? You figure this, right? A combat round being a minute means that your combatant's doing a lot. It's not just one attack. Oh, a hit. It's like parrying and feinting and doing all this stuff. Well, the attack of opportunity, the person's back's turned to you, or they're not paying attention because they're trying to run, and you're swinging that sword out or that mace out to hit that person. It's basically a freebie. Now, for me, there's one. So if guy number 1 runs away, you get an attack opportunity on that guy. But if guy number 2 runs away, you don't get to attack that guy.
Right.
That's the way I play it. Again, this is unofficial rules. It's kind of a house rule in a way, right? Backporting stuff from 3.5 or 3.0 into
exactly.
AD&D.
And with AD&D, there's no combat reflexes or anything like that, and I don't intend to really necessarily bring it into the game. So yeah, 1 attack of opportunity, whereas in 3.5, combat reflexes means your guy has trained to be specifically good at being in a situation where multiple opponents might depart his engagement zone, and he attacks both of them.
Yeah, you're basically Bruce Lee with swords, right? You can kick everybody in the 10-foot radius.
Yes. I'll answer this one real quick. The one complaint I have is having a 1-segment spell interrupted. Spells always start on segment 0. So for me, spells go off on their segment casting time. So if I'm casting Fireball, or I have a player who's casting Fireball with a 3-segment casting time, that spell goes off on segment 3 versus going off on some sort of arbitrary initiative die roll or whatever that doesn't necessarily match segments. Basically, as soon as the round starts, as soon as the magic user declares that he's casting that spell, or the cleric or whomever else, regardless of what's going on in the round, that's when he begins casting it. And I think, and you can go both ways on it. There's anecdotal evidence. Gary himself even played it that way, both of those ways at different times. I find it works much more with segments and segmented initiative to assume, just like a missile attack, right? Missile attack goes at the beginning of the round and the end of the round. Well, if an archer of some sort can fire a bow on what essentially amounts to segment 1, then a magic user can also cast his magic missile, have his magic missile terminate casting on segment 1. So it throws a little bone to the magic users who are grossly underpowered and disadvantaged for the most part.
Especially at low level, right?
Yeah. But I think it fits into and gives higher level magic users a reason to memorize lower level magic user spells.
That's right.
Right, because it's something that they can do starting on segment 0 to ensure that, unless they're very unlucky, that spell is going to go.
That's
off.
why magic missile is so awesome even later on, right?
Yes, yeah.
But I may be recalling this incorrectly. I don't think I am, though. But it's somewhat codified in the rules anyway, right? Because it says spells, then missiles, then melee, right?
Right.
So I think it's already codified in there. The real question is, nobody ever says it happens on segment 0. They say spells first. Well, if my spell takes 5 segments, obviously it's not first, right? Unless you have people with a bunch of really unwieldy weapons, it's not first, right? Or maybe they have to charge or advance or whatever. But yeah, I might be wrong, but I think it is codified that way: spells, missiles, melee. So.
Yeah, and right, and that was one of those things that was left over from sort of the hybrid system of, okay, regardless of initiative, all of these things proceed in this order, versus things proceeding from both sides in opposite orders, I think. But yeah, and there's lots of evidence out there for Gary himself and Frank and all these other guys who were luminaries in the early days doing things different ways. But I really think the spirit of the rules is that the spell should start immediately upon the commencement of the round, right?
So regarding what Joe just stated, and this is my opinion, take it as opinion, read the rules and make your own determination. But regarding 2 attacks around, so now the only time for me, where somebody goes to first always is when they're hasted. That's it. And that's part of the definition of the spell, where they go first, right? If you have 2 attacks around, your first attack happens when your initiative happens. And your second round attack happens at the end of the round, right? That's the way I play it. Some people have those 2 attacks happen at the same time, right? And I don't think I've seen a player or a DM that played it where if you had 2 attacks, the first attack goes first, no matter what your initiative is. I've not seen that. I'm not saying it's not valid. It could be, but I definitely don't play that way. And this goes to same in association with that. At least the way I play, when you have multiple attacks, like 3 every 2 rounds, the first round is 1 attack. The second round is 2 attacks. Right. So the first round you go on your initiative. The second round you go on your initiative, and then at the end of the round, that's how I codify it. I don't think that's explicitly stated anywhere. Right. I may be wrong, but that's the way I play it.
So. Yeah. So there's basically a mention that if one and I can't cite the page number right now, but if one opponent possesses more attacks per round, or more attack routines, as it's called, per round, than the other opponent, then he's entitled to strike before the other opponent and after the other opponent. And then, so that's one of the things that makes things like things with multiple attack routines, like a Chimera or something like that, particularly dangerous, is that you could essentially win the initiative, but if your opponent has more attacks, then he would be able to attack before you and after you. But that's an area that, man, that's really just, that's not a matter of the religion as much as it is the individual opinion on doctrine, right? As far as I'm concerned. But yeah, typically if I've got a guy who can make 2 attacks and I've got a guy who can make 1 attack, the guy who can make 2 attacks will be able to attack once before the guy who can make 1 attack will be able to attack, and then he'll be able to make 1 attack afterward. But that's, DMG 6263.
Yep, that's the separated by a common language problem, right? We both read the same book and have different interpretations, and it may be because I missed something, right? And that's absolutely the case. So,
and that's what's beautiful about this game, though. The warts and all and everything. We can all sit around and we can continue to talk about it at length, and have different interpretation. And it's it might be a bug that has turned into a feature, but I kind of like it, right?
Nothing wrong with that. Like I said, I'm willing to learn even now, right? So if that's codified, I'd like to see it. I'm not saying it's wrong. Especially with Doom's backing that up. I'm likely wrong here, so I'll look it up.
Here, let's. Well, you know what? If you have a moment, I think I'll use this newfangled thing called the internet and try to share this particular thing out.
The great thing about the internet now is you can search for 1E AD&D and get only 5e matches. That's my favorite part. Right. It's like, oh, well, yeah, of course it's 5e. I told you, in quotes, 1E AD&D, but 5e is what you matched. Thanks. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Marketing wins.
So I have to add to stage, evidently. So here's, okay. Oops. It would help if I did the zoom in on the right monitor. Right, so this right here, right? So this guy. Individual initiative for creatures with multiple attack routines. When 1 or more creatures involved in combat are permitted to use their attack routines twice or more often during the round, then they follow initiative. Determinants are employed when the attack routine may... Yeah, so this is where it gets pretty complex. But the basic concept is that whoever has the advantage in the number of attacks would attack first and last. With those members of its group who have the same advantage is possessed by both parties. The initiative roll determines which group strikes first and third, which group strikes second and last. Yeah. So a good call out on the page number.
Yep.
But
so
that's where it is.
One thing to note here, right? And this isn't really something that's carefully codified. The operative word here is creature, and what I'm saying here is creature in AD&D is everything.
Yes.
It's players, non-players, monsters, everything, right?
Absolutely.
So that clears it up, right? That's saying, because if it said monsters, that's different, right? But it says creatures, so it looks like this is everybody.
Right. So you basically, to dig into that a little bit deeper, you basically have what? You have creatures, and you have PCs, and you have monsters, and you have persons, right? And that's about it, because monsters include more than, because, I mean, I guess it depends on who you are, but something like a brownie or something is hardly a monster. Something like a halfling in the monster manual is hardly a monster. Now it might be a person, but those are the distinctions that the game makes. Right.
So yeah, anytime you see creature in there, that usually is a keyword telling you that it's across the board. It's for everyone.
Right. That it's everyone. Yeah, nice page call out.
Yep. Glad to see that. I'll have to use it next time I go. What, Saturday, I guess?
Oh yeah, man. So how's that game going anyway? It's how long you been playing?
Oh, well, it's years, right? I mean, it's years. So we have basically now 5 DMs at the table, right?
Nice.
That are either actively DMing or don't mind DMing or DM'd quite a bit in the past. So we kind of rotate. And usually what it is, it's burnout, right? You're like, I just want to play for a while, right? Because prep time, not insignificant if you really care, right? And so, yeah, we play, we've played a bunch of stuff, including some rules that we're creating ourselves. Maybe will be published. Right. I'm not going to talk much about it because it's not just my stuff, but we also, first edition, third edition, Traveler, Space Opera. What else have we played in there? I mean, we did use Osric for a while, although really, to be honest with you, I'd be using 1E. I don't see a reason to ever use Osric again. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's terrible, but the things I was expecting from Osric, I didn't get. I was hoping Osric would be a more concise 1E rulebook where things are where they need to be. And I get some changes had to be made just because of copyright, trademark stuff. But we did use Osric. So we did years. I DM'd Ardenvolt, right? Which, by the way, hands down, if you're a Mega Dungeon guy, it is the best I've ever seen. Not just played, but seen. By far. Not close. Right? So if you guys want Mega Dungeons, Ardenvolt is the thing, in my opinion.
I want to run a Mega Dungeon, as a matter of fact.
Ardenvolt's the one to do, dude. Now, the guy who writes it, I don't know how he did it, to be honest with you. Everything's in there. He's written his own books, right? Like, there are books in the game. Kind of like, in Skyrim when you pick a book up on the shelf and it has somebody actually wrote a book in here? Really?
Right? That's awesome.
Now, it isn't like the whole book, but you get it. It's got a really good, succinct synopsis. There's new magic items, new herbs, new medicines. I mean, to be honest with you, and I'm not overstating this, by far, as a Mega Dungeon, is the best out there. Period. No competition. None. right? It's Ardenville, a couple steps down, other people's stuff. My opinion.
Right,
But
like Barrow Maze, Stonehell, all
yeah,
that stuff.
don't get me
It's
wrong. I like those.
Ardenville, and then
Yeah,
everything
Castle White
else.
Rock,
Right,
right?
right.
Undermountain.
Yeah.
The Dungeon of Mad Mage is a good example. I really like those too. I mean, I love those. Those are great. They're not at the level of Ardenville. For some reason, it's just better. But you better be ready.
It feels good. Right, but it doesn't. So it's consistent in its presentation as far as environment and mindset goes.
Yes.
That's one of the things that I found with mega dungeons that tend to creep downward over time. Is you'll find areas. Now I'm all for weird and fantastic areas in these big dungeons and stuff, and things that don't seem to fit, but consistency in the idea is important to me.
This
and I have Ardenville, but
it has everything. So there's science in there,
right,
but it is not incongruous. Yeah. It is in there from the beginning,
right.
So you just don't know because you haven't explored it yet. It is not inconsistent with itself. It isn't like I got bored and I needed to do something else. That was put in there intentionally, right? Because he wanted that component of the original adventure, like Buried Expedition to Buried Peaks, to be in there, right? And it has, yes. If you're a purist, and when I was younger, I was, right? I'm like, there are no firearms in my D&D, period. What is this stupid ass Spelljammer shit? Right? I mean, I was like, what the hell is going on here? Right? And that's when I kind of stepped off, and I'm like, I'm done buying their stuff because this is silly. But sadly, because of that, I miss stuff. Neat stuff.
Yeah.
I never had that feeling with Expedition to Barrier Peaks, by the way. Right? Because it still felt like D&D. It was just weird D&D. Right?
Yeah, I agree.
This has that stuff in there, but I got to tell you, it's a very consistent environment. Consistent. You just better be ready, because it is not your typical mega dungeon. It isn't just a bunch of rooms collected. There are factions in there. There's a lot of NPCs. There's cities in there, right? I mean, you have to be ready.
Sounds excellent.
You have to be ready, man. It's not for your novice. Even me, right. I had a lot of trouble managing it, right? Because they did these things, and that caused these things to take place, right? And I go like, okay, yeah, that's got to keep that straight, right? The one thing that's kind of funny in there is there are some what I would call tropes that when the players get there, their eyes roll, right? They're like, God, not this again, right? And it's like, yep, it's that again. To me, it's hilarious. Right. But, oh God, right?
Yeah.
So, but it is, in my opinion, for Mega Dungeon, it is the perfect one. I don't need another one. I literally don't.
Yeah, you're right.
So, but I DM'd that for several years. They did not complete it in several years.
Right. And
I would say they got through maybe half of it, maybe. Right?
Yeah, weekly? Bi-weekly?
Weekly.
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 Yeah.
And we're talking, between 5 and 10 hours. Weekly?
Right.
They did not get through it.
So,
right.
So what? Let's just say 3 years. Say, be conservative and say like 130 sessions of 7 hours. So pushing 1,000 hours.
Let's just call it 5 hours, right? 5 hours, because you have blab session at the beginning and spin down at the end. So let's just say 5 hours, 52 weeks, right? For 3 years. And they got about halfway through. Right?
Incredible.
Yeah. I can't. There is nothing close. Nothing. I don't care which one it is. Maybe eventually, if we get Castle Greyhawk, maybe that's it. I seriously doubt it, because this person has the ability to look back and design it based on, standing on the shoulders of giants, right?
Right.
But yeah, I not even close. I in fact, if I had the money, I'd be buying people a whole bunch of copies of that.
Yeah, man. I can't think of a higher endorsement. So thanks for that. I picked it up on PDF on sale quite some time ago, and I've just skimmed. I mean, I was really happy with the presentation and everything, and the length and the size and what I saw and whatnot. But I haven't done it justice, because it's big, and even for PDF, it's expensive.
Yeah, it's not cheap. I have one complaint, and it's only a matter for the print version. The map book could have been organized better, right? So they have what, like the full topographical map for that level, and then after that, they have it split over pages, so it's like viewable, which is a little bit weird. That's the only complaint I have. I mean, if you have a PDF version, this isn't an issue. But yeah, because you could just scroll, you could just zoom right on the map. But yeah, it's a little weird. It's not a problem per se. It's just the only thing. This is weird. It's a strange thing. There is for a volume of that size, it's 1,200 pages, might be even 1,500 pages.
It's huge. It's huge,
right? Is extremely well done. So if you guys love Mega Dungeons, this is the one. Not joking, it's the one. My personal opinion, fits perfectly in 1E, has exactly the same mindset as 1E does. Right? In my opinion, exactly the mindset. I know it was built based on Osric because that was the way they could publish that at the time. But it is a old school adventure in the guise of what Gary Gygax might do, right?
Right.
With all the good and bad that comes with that, right? How many cursed items are in there? Ask Gary, right? Got to play test all those cursed items. Right, but my point is,
it sounds wonderful.
Yeah, and I I'm not getting paid for this. I don't have any sponsorship. I just like it that much, right?
I don't get paid for anything, so I understand.
But yeah, so we play pretty much anything, but AD&D is the focus. I'd say 75% of the time it's AD&D. We might take a break to just do something else for a little while, right? Traveler or space opera or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
A little, like splash of sci-fi in there never hurts. Never hurts anyone, right?
But it's interesting, and part of the reason why I like it is it is not D&D like, right? I mean,
right.
Organizationally it is, but in most sci-fi campaigns, you could get shot, and your character could be, a 3-year character, and one shot to the face, and you're no longer here, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a kind of a different strategy to play those, right?
Right.
That I really appreciate. That you really
I will
don't
say that
get
in
with other
sci-fi,
stuff.
Yeah, weapon choice most certainly matters.
Yes, it does. Yeah, and for our group, aside from our own rules, right? Worlds Without Number is. I'm sorry, Stars Without Number is our preferred. Right? To be honest,
right. I've never played.
They're all good. All of those books. Now, I haven't played Cities Without Number, so I can't really answer that. Although I suspect it uses the same rule base. But World
Yeah.
Without Number, amazing. Right, really, really well done.
Yeah, and that's all what Kevin Crawford. And what I really like about him is he gives away his SRDs completely for free, and they actually include a lot of information. So if anyone's ever interested in checking out the rule sets without having to buy into it or purchasing something they're not going to be happy with, there's full SRDs, and these are lengthy, that are put out entirely for free. That you can just grab from Drive Through RPG or whatever.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
So one thing I just mentioned this, and this doesn't really matter in the big picture, but just a personal experience, right? I always buy the offset print versions of the books because I prefer them.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So that generally means I have to get in on the crowdfunding, which, by the way, I don't mind doing because he always delivers, and his products are excellent. Right. And believe me, I've been burned on RPG stuff with crowdfunding. More than I'd like to admit, right? To the point where I'm really reluctant to do it. But I got a book, and showed up at my house, opened it up, and I think what it was is when the books are after they're bound, there's rollers on the conveyor that they print with. Those are the marks on the cover of my book. And I wasn't mad. Right? I'm like, hey, just wanted to let you know, dude, there's some marking on here, right? On the cover. And he sent me a new book. Didn't ask for one. Didn't bitch.
Nice.
He's just like, yeah, that shouldn't have happened. And I'm like,
yeah,
dude, it's not necessary, right? But he's like, no, you're getting a new book. No challenges. Just
that's the way it should be.
The very best of type of person to deal with in that kind of situation. And I didn't ask. I was just telling him, hey, just want to let you know,
right?
Maybe they should check the tooling.
Yeah, that some of these,
right?
Yeah, some of these might have a problem. You might want to work with the distributor. You might want to double check them before you ship them out to other people.
Right.
Just altruistic type of stuff. And then the dude sends you a book and didn't ask for the old one back, I assume.
He did not. No. I would have shipped it back to him. But yeah.
Right.
I didn't even care.
Yeah, that's awesome.
To be honest. Because it wasn't, the book wasn't harmed, to be honest. It was still fully readable. Right.
Well, maybe one of these days, probably even now, as a matter of fact, since, once you buy those Kickstarters and they ship out, those original offset prints end up being worth way more than you ever paid for them.
That's right.
To someone who really enjoys the game. And, if you have a little misprint that, nobody else has, that can become a commodity.
Right. Yeah. Like the in COD we trust quarter I have. Right. This is hilarious. It actually says that. I gotta. Somebody did that intentionally. It can't be accidental, right?
Right.
The slash on the G got chipped off or whatever of the die.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't. Again, really good. They're very solid rules, right? And they suffice, right? I like it better than Traveler. I like Traveler. It's a good rule. It's a good rule set. I don't follow it. I basically play classic Traveler. I don't play the new stuff.
Right. Same here.
Sweaty nerd.
Because it's bounced around a lot. Yeah.
But yeah, I really appreciate his stuff, and the fact that he's a cool dude too. That's not that common. that's what I call a. So.
yeah, no doubt. That's not that common, and yeah, let me just go ahead and take a shot at Osric real quick. Just for the hell of it, I suppose. I like the concept. Okay. I like that they had the willingness to proceed in the way that they did, and that they enabled much of the OSR as it sort of moved forward. But that's kind of a double-edged sword, because they were some of the originals who left out some of the creativity and uniqueness and nuance of AD&D, and then people who came after looked at it, and it sort of whitewashed everything that was important, or at least many things that were important to me. So it bothers me a little bit, and their most recent Kickstarter bothered me quite a bit, and I'm glad I mean, I knew I wasn't gonna buy into it. But that was a big Kickstarter, and here I am. I'm sitting on this monster manual that I had that changes a whole bunch of stuff, and I haven't published it because I have no art. And I was just looking. Well, I have some, but it's slow coming. And I looked at the GM section on monsters from this $250,000 Kickstarter or whatever, and I know a bunch of that stuff goes into actually purchasing the books and shipping it to people, and all of that kind of stuff. But there's like 5 monster illustrations in the whole damn thing.
Right.
I'm like, you guys changed layout, popped this thing out in 5 months, called it a game, whereas before it was a publishing resource, and you got like 5 monster illustrations. The least you could have done is paid some artists and whatnot.
Yeah,
when like somebody like me is sitting around being like, I can't release a monster, so I'm gonna release the monster book with no art. Who cares? If it's good enough for Osric with their $250,000 Kickstarter, it's good enough for me to give away for free by donation. But anyway, that's my piece on them. And they didn't include some of the things that they said they were going to include. They're still using the British English spellings of things and all this stuff, and it bothers me. It bothers me.
That is something you're going to have to deal with Ardenval, because the author is a UK guy.
I don't mind that. I don't. Well, I mean, maybe I mind him being a UK guy, but I don't mind him using UK English, as long as he's he's not reprinting D&D.
No, I get you. I've had limited interactions with them, and they've all been extremely positive. So,
right.
I have no complaints.
Yeah, and just the fact that just the fact that so much is given to the community without restriction, because the SRDs for Kevin Crawford's work, for example, those are he's like, hey, you can copy and paste this whole damn thing. You can copy and paste it into whatever, do whatever you want with it. I don't care. And that's remarkable. And I think we need more of that openness in the RPG space, Well,
and they're good.
RPG space.
The rules are good.
Right.
It's not trash that you just give away. It's good. Right? He's giving away good stuff. It's just like you're giving away good stuff. So.
Oh, well, thank you, sir. So it's even worse. So Jason, it's even, I've skimmed the PDFs because they ended up putting out the PDFs for free. The thing I noticed first when I first grabbed them a couple of months ago, and they've been revised now, I think. But one of them had no chapters. I'm like, there's no chapters, and I can't even search this thing. It wasn't even OCR'd or anything. Yeah, bad news.
Well, that's like the only positive things to have a PDF, in my opinion. Right? I know people love reading electronic devices. I look at a screen all damn day. I don't want to look at a screen when I game. Right? No, I'll manage my character sheet on my screen because I can't write with my crippled hands. But yeah, I just like, come on, guys, you can't search it. That's like 90% of the value is searching.
Yeah, exactly. And I end up looking at a screen for whatever because I'm playing with VTT until I can get my my kids, my boys are about the age. where they're capable of undertaking this endeavor without fighting each other in real life. So it's about time to introduce them, and at that point, I'll be able to break out the physical books again. But where I live, there's no RPG players or anything like that. Hey, thanks, Michael. Appreciate it, bud.
Hey, we
Have
have
fun at work
Michael.
tomorrow or whatever you do.
We need to mark that. We need to mark that.
Oh yeah, the print version's a mess, huh? Well, they were going to do that coffee table style book, which I thought was very stupid.
Nothing's better than having an enormous book to take space at your gaming table, right?
Yeah.
Wham!
Right. Bad news.
Space at a gaming table is really it's at a premium, guys. Don't make these giant books.
Yeah. Right. Well, we got anything else, or I mean, because once again, I could talk all night. I'm sure that I've kept you long enough, and I'm sure that family's looking for me or something. I just like to come back here and pretend like I don't exist, and I don't get much opportunity to do that. Anybody have any questions or anything? I mean, I really appreciate everyone dealing with the technical thing early on, which happened 2 weeks in a row, and I'm gonna see what's going on. At least we made it farther this time, because all that happened was stream started freezing up, and melee.
It's Boulay.
Say I like crepes. Oh boy. Yeah, I love doing these, and I love talking to I really appreciate you hanging out for as long as you have, Kevin. Thank you. And I really appreciate it. I'm really glad to have met you, just so you know. And I think most of these people who have met you feel the same way. Maybe Michael doesn't, but he's not around now, so.
Well, I mean, it's easy to talk to you, man, and anytime.
Thank you. You too.
Right. That you're if anything, that star-crossing circumstance where you happen to be in 2 games of the same, kind of important to me. So I met some really cool people, and that's not something that happens often. Not for me anyway, being a hermit and all.
Yeah, I agree.
So
yep. I become more and more of a hermit as the days go by, right? Here, how about this?
No, I'm an obscure, odd, smelly nerd. I don't have any channels or presence on the internet to speak of, right? So maybe someday. I'm not. I'm kind of an introverted guy. You probably noticed that from this conversation, but.
I've noticed actually the opposite, because this is the most that you have ever talked since I've met you, I think, and
that's probably true.
This seems like your natural space. So
it's definitely not. It is absolutely not. Right? I mean, like when I first was going on Devil's Channel, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. It's way too social, right? It's just way too social. But in all honesty, you make it easy. You make it easy. You're easy to talk to. You're an honest, straightforward guy. That's something I appreciate. It's not something I interact with very often these days. And you're in the hobby, and you have the same, let's just say, likes that I do in that hobby. So it's easy to match, right? In my opinion,
right. Yeah, that's how I feel as well, and that's one of the reasons it was always good to game with you, and it's always easy to gravitate toward whatever type of character you were playing and stuff like that, because you just meet people and have a synergy. And as Joe says here, I hope you come back to anytime, man. If you ever have like something you just want to talk about or whatever, um, we'll just do it. You know.
Yeah, no, that the offer's open anytime.
Right on.
Like I said, I enjoy talking to you, and I don't get out much, so it's helpful. So no worries.
Yeah, good.
I'll be
It's
back.
helpful to me too. Right. And again, super appreciated, and it's very helpful for me also. So I'm glad it's therapeutic for me and you, and I hope it's therapeutic for this audience, such as they are. I appreciate all you guys too for hanging out and watching this thing with a couple of obscurities, but we love talking to you. And on that same note, if anybody who's ever watching this just wants to come on and BS, I'll have you on too. I don't care. It's you know, it's about talking to people who enjoy the same things that we do, and and getting to know them, and because I don't get that opportunity in life.
You
Basically,
know what
I've got my
surprised me
family,
today?
a couple games I play in, and that's about it. Yeah, go ahead.
Gonzalo did not roast me, even though I gave him such a hard time.
Yeah,
So much nicer a
yeah.
guy.
Right, right.
I was totally expecting him to be, that guy. But
Yeah. Well, he's capable of that.
oh,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, I like Gonzalo too. He's a great guy.
Yep. Cool.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you, Kevin. Have a great night. And thanks to all of you and sticking through and rejoining the multiple streams that I had to start that I got to know now go back and clean up. But thank you. Much appreciated. And I hope you guys have a great rest of the week.